Today we are going to see, what if Bella Swan uncovered the truth behind Dracula? Part 2. So let's get started. I left the flat before Rose came out of her room. Last night had been a whirlwind. A few days of cooling down time before our next conversation would be good for both of us. As I walked, I quickly fired off a text message to Emmett, letting him know I'd be at his building around 8:30. I stopped to pick up cappuccino and the newspaper. He was helping me out. It was the least I could do. At 8:30 on the dot, Emmett stood outside his building, and umbrella sheltering him from a steady drizzle. He was dressed for work, jacket, white shirt, tie. He was perfectly put together, although the dark circles under his eyes gave an edge to his all-American good looks. He gave me a half-hearted smile and a one-armed hug before leading me through his building to the garage. Gas mileage sucks, but there is a GPS built in that can help you avoid any traffic snags. Thank you, Emmett. I can't begin to tell you how much I appreciate this. I hesitated as Rose's words about my using Emmett as a crutch flitted through my mind. Look, Emmett, you have been such a great friend. I want you to know how much I appreciate it. I feel like I should have done more to acknowledge it than I have. He waved me off. It's not any different than what you've done for me, Bella. It's what friends do. I don't feel like I've been a very good friend to you, Emmett. I couldn't make eye contact when I said it. I hated to think that I had let him down or taken advantage of him in any way. He laughed and poked my shoulder. Actually, you've been the best. I don't know what I'd have done without you. I don't know. Maybe not get involved with Rose, I teased, trying to keep the conversation light. The smile never quite reached his eyes. No, I think that still would have happened. You just helped me not get pulled under in her wake. Emmett opened the door of a blue German sedan. You sure you're okay to drive this? I think that's more a question for you. Bella, you'll be fine. Go take some time for yourself. Getting away will be good for you. Go take some time for myself. I'd never done that before. I had never really thought about the fact that I was always surrounded by people, at school, at home. Very rarely was I ever by myself. And here I was, taking a trip on my own. Doing something just for me. It was scary, but at the same time, it was a bit exciting. Giving Emmett a quick hug, I climbed in the car. That it will, thanks. I'll see you later this week. He held onto the door for a minute, as if struggling to put a thought into words. That day at the tower. I wish that we would have pushed, tried a little harder, you know. Maybe we gave in to them a little too easily. Emmett was facing the same thing I was, and was trying to figure it out in his own way. I'm not sure what prompted me to do it, but I jumped out of the car and threw my arms around Emmett's neck. I wanted to let him know that I was in the same place, and that even thought we didn't push it, he would always be special to me. He surprised me though. Instead of reciprocating my hug, he scooped me up and kissed me. Unlike the first time, there was no slow build. It was desperate and bruising and filled with need. But the desire couldn't be forced. Kind of like an airplane ticket. It was non-transferable. Maybe we were both clutching at one last hope that there was something more than just a friendship, or that there could be someone else out there for either of us. And, while the kiss was amazing, it wasn't the same. It was warm, and it felt comfortable. But the high, the intensity, wasn't there. Our connections existed with others. I had come to that realization last night. Emmett was still struggling to get there. He prolonged the kiss, almost as if hoping to tempt fate. Trying to force something that neither of us could feel. A spark or connection to each other. Knowledge that the one that we wanted desired us in return. He set me back down on the pavement gently and gave me a quick kiss on the forehead. I hope that someday I can prove myself wrong. Maybe if I can get her out of my head and you do the same. It would have been easy to try and hide away with Emmett, to try and lose myself in a wonderful man, who if things had played out just a bit differently could have been the one. But following that path wouldn't solve anything. And it wasn't worth risking a wonderful friendship. You and I both know it doesn't work that way, I need to see through whatever I have with Edward. Assuming he still wants me. You and Rose aren't any different. He'd be a fool not to. His lack of acknowledgement of Rose didn't go unnoticed, but I didn't push. He didn't need that right now. I'm not so sure about that, I've done a good job of pushing him away while trying to figure my shit out. And he might have come his own realizations too. I stood up on tiptoe and gave Emmett a quick peck on the cheek. Know that I love you, no matter what. With that, I climbed in the car and adjusted the seat before turning the key. As I pulled out, I glanced in the rear view mirror. Emmett stood in the garage, hands stuffed in his pants, shoulders slumped. He looked like a broken man. I knew the expression well. And my heart broke a little bit knowing that there was nothing I could do to make it better. But in this situation, it wasn't about me. He and Rose had to figure it out together, just like Edward and I did. Maybe tease what they were doing when I came home last night. I stopped at the flat long enough to grab my backpack and overnight bag, and was on the road to Whitby by 9:30. I put my iPod on shuffle and I lost myself in thought as I drove. I couldn't get Emmett's comment out of my head. We'd both been struggling with attractions that ran counterintuitive to logic. I couldn't stop thinking about what Alec had said about not being able to control how we felt. As much as I wanted to scoff at the concept, so much of what I read made sense. The good and the bad. Great. Next thing, I'd believe in the Easter Bunny, Tooth Fairy, and Santa Claus. It felt ridiculous to even consider. How do you know that you are meant to be with someone, can't exist without them, when you hardly knew them? I didn't know Edward Masson. I had glimpses, but I didn't know how real those glimpses were. Alice insisted that he felt this same indescribable pull, but how could I ever feel confident in that? Logic wanted to make it into an infatuation. Purely chemical, but that felt so trite, so trivial. Rose had accused me of being a drama queen, of not giving Edward the opportunity to explain. While I knew that she was right in her observation, I was doing it for self-preservation. Deep down I knew that if I let him explain, I'd take it at face value because I wanted so desperately to be with him. I'd take any explanation he gave willingly, even if it wasn't the right one. And I knew that the minute I allowed that he would have absolute power over me. And I would be lost. I hadn't realized until I said it to Alice last night. My greatest fear was losing myself. That I would willingly give up everything to be what he needed me to be. Maybe there was something to that. I've always happily molded myself to what others wanted, never what I needed. I had no clue how to balance being myself and being with someone else. It would be too easy to get caught up in a pity party. The old Bella would have. I would have allowed and moaned and not done anything about it. But the pain in Emmett's eyes this morning helped me shape my own resolve. I couldn't settle for second best. I needed things to be on the same terms. Edward was my first choice. He always would be, but I wouldn't settle for being second. We had to be equal to be whole. Assuming he still wanted me. He told me once he wouldn't be a foregone conclusion. He was right, and he didn't deserve to be. When I got back to London, we would talk. I'd listen to his side of the story. I'd tell him how he made me feel. And then we would figure out what came next, if there was a next. With no more secrets or running away. Whitby would give me a chance to sort through everything and put it all to rest. No more Mike. No more regrets. No more living in the past. It was time to work on moving forward. I pushed the thoughts away, and focused on the drive, the music, anything to help me escape for a while. I managed to relax, enjoying the time alone. I LLY started singing as I navigated through the North Yorkshire moors. I don't think I'll ever see anything as beautiful again as long as I live. Around 4, I made the turn onto a long winding lane. Sandstone columns marked the entry to a large gravel courtyard. The hall itself loomed large from the road, yellow sandstone and a profusion of green and pink fauna. I parked the car and made my way to the front door. It flew open before I could knock or look for a bell. You must be Bella. I can always pick out a fellow American by the clothing. A lovely woman stood smiling in the doorway. She appeared to be in her mid-30s. Very much the definition of Little Miss All-American, with light brown hair, a button nose and a big smile. Come on in, you have to be exhausted after that drive. As we made our way through the manor. I couldn't call a building this size a house. She introduced herself as Esme Cullen. I was so excited when Alice called and mentioned that she had an American friend who needed help. I love England, but sometimes I miss the States. It will be so nice to have you around for a few days. While Esme didn't have quite the energy that Alice did, she made up for it in enthusiasm. She went on about the renovations they had just completed, the local points of interest, and all the things that I would want to do. I dropped my bag and backpack in my room as Esme explained all the amenities. The 4-poster bed, the fireplace, the attached bathroom. The suite was quite overwhelming, and more appropriate for a honeymoon or weekend away. The optimist in me hoped for another time, a better reason. Come, you must be famished. I just put out an afternoon snack in the library. Esme continued to talk as she led me down the hallway. Carlyle was surprised when he heard that Alice called. He is very close to Edward, and had heard mention from him of an American working with Jasper on her dissertation about Dracula. We both would have expected the call to come from him, not from Alice. We crossed the main hallway into a beautiful cherry-paneled room filled with wing-back chairs and a large leather sofa. A man with hair so fair it was almost white sat in a chair by the fireplace, book in hand. Alice and I bumped into each other last night. We were discussing when I was planning to visit Whitby, and she mentioned it on a whim. I was actually standing with her when she called you. Esme took my hand and led me forward into the room. Carlyle, Alice's American friend is here. Bella Swan, this is my very proper British husband, Carlyle. She said playfully. The smile on her face made it clear that she adored him. The man stood and turned to acknowledge me. The moment he registered my face, he lost what little color there was in his fair skin. It's nice to meet you, I responded, filling the silence in an attempt to be polite. Alice mentioned that she and her brother grew up with you. Carlyle's eyes narrowed for a moment. You are friends with Alice? I nodded, not knowing how else to respond. And Edward too. I nodded again, this time not able to meet his eyes. I am sure that the furious blush gave away the fact that it was more than a passing acquaintance. Well, this is interesting. He walked towards table laid with decanters and bottles. I think I could use a drink. Would you care for a scotch, Bella? He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid and returned to his chair, nodding to the one opposite him. I sat down and took the crystal tumbler. A phone rang from another room, giving Esme the opportunity to excuse herself. Claiming there were things that she needed to deal with. She promised to return in a bit. I felt the need to address the elephant in the room so that I could maintain control of the conversation. I'm guessing from your reaction that you notice my resemblance. So you know about Maggie? Carlyle did not look at me as he asked the question, choosing instead to stare into his glass. Yes. What could I say? It wouldn't be easy to elaborate on how. Simple acknowledgement was probably the best. I know Alice and Edward because of her. She was my cousin. Her parents moved here to be closer to my family. He hesitated, taking a drink of his scotch. I think it was always uncomfortable for them here. I sat quietly, slowly sipping from the glass of scotch. I hated the taste, but I felt it only polite. Besides, it gave me a distraction while I waited for Carlyle to continue. He paused again, his mouth twisting into a wry smile. I was off at university and then medical school for their teenage years. I would like to have thought I could have helped out, maybe convinced them to seek treatment. Naive, but such are the romantic ideals of the young. I wasn't sure that I wanted to hear this. Maggie the good, Maggie the pure. It was hard enough to look just like her, but did she have to be so perfect? It made every fault or bad decision of mine stand out all that much more. I got a phone call a few weeks ago. Apparently Edward is giving up tilting at windmills, and is considering going into practice. He made a comment about putting all of his knowledge to use for once, to finally start doing some good things in his life. At the time, I couldn't fathom what would make him give up on research. But now, he trailed off. I was unsure if it was an invitation to speak, or if he needed a moment to collect his thoughts. It was clear that he was having a difficult time with this. While I was thankful to Alice for arranging somewhere for me to stay, I couldn't put this poor man through the ringer. It was totally selfish. Carlyle, I very much appreciate your willingness to talk about something unpleasant. If it's uncomfortable for you to have me here, I absolutely understand. If you can recommend a few places in the village, I'll make arrangements to stay somewhere else. I was concerned about being an inconvenience, but this is obviously more than just an inconvenience, and I don't want to cause you any pain. He waved me off before standing to pour another glass of scotch. It was a long time ago, Bella. Esme and I are more than happy to have you here. I think she's excited to have a fellow Yank around. Esme re-entered the library, and they shared a brief silent exchange that I could not interpret. Bella, we have something going on in the village tonight that I forgot about. Can I ask you to make yourself at home? The grounds are yours to explore, and the library is at your disposal. I do sincerely apologize. Esme was absolutely apologetic, her hands clasped in front of her in apprehension. Please, Esme, you have been kind enough to put me up at your inconvenience, it's no problem at all. I'll have more than plenty to keep me entertained. I excused myself, and returned to my room. It only took me a few minutes to unpack, and I quickly found myself at odds with what to do. I didn't feel like watching TV or, surprisingly enough, reading. I glanced out the window to see that it was still light out. The flowers had just started to come out, maybe a walk around the grounds would help me unwind from my drive and kill some time. If not, I had a feeling I'd be buying Carlyle Cullen a bottle of something before I left. I made my way down the stairs and out through the kitchen. A large English garden, replete with a boxwood maze, had been visible from my room. The idea of traipsing through hedges 6 feet tall was like a dream come true. I half wished I had packed something other than jeans, which didn't do much to evoke the feeling of pride and prejudice. Then again, I'm not very much a long dress and floppy hat sort of girl. I picked a sprig of pink flowers of the azalea bush, and spun it around in my fingers as I entered the maze. The boxwood was a lovely, dense green, and the estate was far enough from the road to make me feel like I had dropped into another time. I followed the turns in the maze, allowing myself to roam and enjoying the sense of tranquility. I lost track of time as I wandered through twists and turns, and was so entranced in my exploration that I was surprised to realize that the light had started to fade. I needed to find my way out before it was too dark to see. I paused to look up for something to help me get my bearings, just as the sky opened up to dump buckets of rain. Just perfect. What is it with this country and rain? I started to jog, trying to find my way back through the maze, but hitting dead end after dead end. The downfall picked up, making it harder to see as I ran faster. The rain, the cold, and all the weeks of overthinking and reacting finally caught up to me, and I started to cry out of frustration. Why had I come here? It was just a stupid book, and what had it gotten me? Every dead end I hit simply reinforced the roadblocks I had thrown up for myself. I thought I would make the correct turn, only to be confronted by another wall of green. Green, everywhere I looked, taunting me. I couldn't escape. After who knows how long of blind turns and dead ends, I finally found my way out of the maze. The lights from the kitchen cast a warm glow, and I ran for the house, desperate for shelter. When I reached the back door, I grabbed the handle and tugged. It didn't give. I pulled harder. No luck. Carlisle and Esme would have left by now. I ran around to the front of the building and up the steps to the front door. I yanked hard, and it gave easily. I darted in and slammed the door behind me, leaning against it as I struggled to catch my breath. I was cold, I was tired, and I was drenched. I was in country where my best friend wasn't speaking to me at the moment. I was borderline obsessed with a man I hardly knew, and I couldn't go home. I didn't even have a home anymore. I was literally and figuratively stuck, with no clue of how to get out. Isabella, I should have registered shock at anyone being here, let alone him. But I was too worn down to think anymore. I stepped forward and threw my arms around Edward's neck. I felt him stiffen, but I was too desperate to let go. Please just reciprocate, if just for a minute, I pleaded. I'm so tired of trying to be strong. I'm tired of being scared. I know I've been terrible to you and I am so incredibly sorry. I didn't want to hurt you, but I didn't want you to hurt me either. My request was all Edward needed. His arms were immediately around me, his hand pushing my wet hair out of my face and smoothing it back. Shish, you're okay. He continued to run his hand over my hair, waiting as I caught my breath. And I didn't want to catch my breath, because I knew that when I did, he would release me and I'd be alone again. That he would leave, and all that we would ever be is a memory because of my fears. Isabella, you are soaking wet and you are shivering. You need to dry off and get warm. I took that as my cue, and dropped my arms, stepping back to wipe my face. I'm sorry, go change clothes. Esme put together a tray. It's in the kitchen. I'll get it and meet you in the library. His face was unreadable. The front of his Oxford was stained with wet spots. I wiped my face with the palm of my hand, partially to clear away the water, partially to hide my embarrassment. I'm sorry about your shirt. It's just a shirt. Go. He pointed up the steps. I turned and ran up the steps to my room, where I quickly stripped out of my wet clothes and toweled off. I pulled on dry clothes and swiftly blew my hair dry in an attempt to defrost before getting dressed. I grabbed an elastic band out of my backpack, and pulled my hair back in a knot as I descended the steps. I could see Edward through the door of the library, his arm resting on the fireplace mantel. He appeared to be lost in the flames. A tray had been placed on the table loaded down with cheese, grapes, crackers and crudité. My stomach growled at the sight of food. I grabbed a grape and popped it in, my mouth on the way to the sideboard to survey my options. Bottles of scotch, whiskey, brandy and port were neatly arrayed. I poured myself a snifter of brandy, and settled into the wing-back chair I had occupied earlier. Would you like a blanket? I might be able to find a sweatshirt somewhere, Edward asked quietly. I couldn't read anything in his tone. He might have asked me about the weather. I'm okay now. I just needed dry clothes and a towel. Edward turned to face me. He looked tired, dark circles beneath brilliant green eyes. He had the same haunted look about him that I saw on Emmett from the review mirror this morning. My heart, ever the traitor, flip-flopped a bit at the concept of him longing after me like Emmett did for Rose. I had no right to want that, to hope, yet I couldn't help it. I had been cruel and unthinking. He deserved better than me. Bella, I need to talk to you. I want to explain some things, and I need you to listen to me. No running away, no shutting me out. Promise me you will listen. He paused, studying me. If you promise to listen, then I promise to tell you things that I should have a very long time ago. I leaned forward to grab a cracker off the tray. It bought me a bit of time to think. Edward picked up the poker and gave the logs in the fireplace a jab, stirring up the flames. Once happy with the heat it was generating, he settled into the wing-back chair across from me. His legs stretched out in front of him, ankles crossed. His fingers drummed absently on the arm of the chair, as if trying to channel nervous energy or anxiety. We stared at each other for a long time. The only sound in the room was the popping of the wood as it burnt. Every moment of silence scared me more, but I knew that it was his story to tell, and I had to do my part. I would sit, listen, and hope that I could understand. Edward took a long breath before launching in, assuming my silence to be acquiescence. You don't ever have to ask me to reciprocate. How could I not? You don't ever have to ask me to reciprocate. How could I not? He said it so quietly, if I hadn't watched his lips move I might have missed that he'd spoken. Edward, please, just listen to me. I'll let you ask any question you want. Call me a bastard, throw things at me, just hear me out first. I picked up another cracker off the tray, and leaned back into the chair. With food in one hand and a drink in the other, I didn't have to worry about fidgeting or nervous energy. I am not a good man, Isabella. I lost my faith in humanity, in compassion a long time ago. Edward paused, taking a drink from his glass. When Maggie died, I threw myself into school. I was angry at her, at the world for taking her away from me, and at myself for not seeing it sooner. I was going to be a doctor, yet I couldn't see that she was sick. It was all some sort of obscene joke. He took a long breath, staring into the fire. It gave me a chance to study him. The dark shadows didn't detract from his looks. It gave him a haunted, world-weary quality. I had a momentary flash of Heathcliff wandering the moors in search for Cathy. And I shook my head in disgust. There was a life beyond books. I didn't want to practice after I finished medical school. My residency, all my efforts went toward research. I convinced myself that if I worked hard enough, pushed myself, I could find a cure for the disease that killed Maggie. I knew it couldn't bring her back, but it was a way of keeping her alive. He drained his scotch and set the glass on the table. Leaning forward, he rested his elbows on his knees and wove his fingers together. I watched him steeple his fingers. Then relax, steeple, then relax, as if trying to work out tension. His eyes never left his hands. It was as if the motion were soothing to him. Up until recently, I had 3 things in my life. My work, my family, and periodically I would bring a woman home to fill the void. And I'd always end up feeling guilty for using them to make me feel whole. I had a momentary flash of us, kissing in the rain, in his car, in his bed. I closed my eyes, torn between wanting to go back to the way I felt in those moments and the pain that other women had been there too. I wasn't naive in thinking that he'd been with other women, but the reality of it hurt too much. I'd idealized what we had as something different, something special. Knowing at other women had tried to fill the space that I wanted to claim made the jealousy flare, and I lashed out in anger. Is this where I get to call you a bastard now? I whispered angrily. Edward looked up at me. His eyebrow raised as if in curiosity. Then he shook his head and let out a wry laugh. I should have phrased that better. I'm not comparing you to them. I just wanted you to know where my head was at before meeting you. He continued to flex his fingers, until finally twisting his wrists around to pop his knuckles as he leaned back in the chair. The first time I saw you, you were like a magnet that I couldn't escape. I was torn between getting as far away from you as possible and actively pursuing you. And I will admit, at first, all I could see was the resemblance to her. I'd be a lie to tell you anything otherwise. I sent you the wild roses knowing that they would provoke you. I wanted to see if you would respond the same way she would have. But that night I found you at the club, you came out swinging. You took what I gave and turned it back around on me in spades. You were fierce and beautiful and angry. There was such fire in your reactions, like nothing I'd ever seen. And it pulled me in even further. Any chance I had of staying away was gone the moment that idiot knocked you into me at the bar. I closed my eyes, remembering his words outside the club. God help me, I want to stay away from you, vampire girl. But I can't. You accused me of tormenting you, of playing games. I never intended to. I assumed that I was tormenting myself, and that by staying closed off and aloof, I kept you intrigued. I needed to make you want me, pursue me. That was the only way that I could be sure that this wasn't some misguided obsession on my part. Wanting you was never an issue. It's safe to say we both felt the attraction from day one. I stated quietly. I had responded wholeheartedly to his baiting. It had fueled me on, and in doing so I had never stopped to ask questions. I rushed in, and got burned for not insisting on more answers up front. He stood and walked to the sideboard to refill his glass. At first, you were a representation of what I had once been. I wanted you so that I could find that in myself. But the more I saw of you, the more you gave me hope of what could be. You were all I could see, all I wanted. I needed your light, your hope, your strength to feel complete. It scared me. There was an absolute irony in his statement, and I laughed dryly. I'm anything but strong, Edward. I jump without thinking and make knee-jerk decisions. He drained his glass and poured another. I looked down at my drink. I had finished it during the course of the conversation. Would you like a refill? He must have seen me studying my empty glass. I stood and walked towards the sideboard, waiting for him to move away. Instead, he stepped closer, reaching up to push a loose strand of hair away from my face. You looked like a drowned rat earlier. His hand traced down my cheek, and the instinct to respond leapt to the surface. My arms shot up to wrap around his neck as I tried to pull him in closer. Instead of responding, Edward reached up to gently grasp my wrists, untwining them from around his neck. You need to hear me out, please. I don't want you to do something you'll regret because I was weak enough to give in. I upped my arms and stepped back as the embarrassment and humiliation rushed through me. Quickly turning to the sideboard, I refilled my glass and immediately tossed back a long drink. The liquid burned, as it hit my throat and I broke out in a fit of coughing. Slow down. You shot tequila and horses, not brandy. Don't patronize me, Edward. I am a big girl, which includes owning up for things I shouldn't have done. While I meant it in reference to my shotgunning of good brandy, it really did cover so much more. I refilled my glass and curled back up in my chair, knees pulled to my chest as I stared into the fire. The flames danced and crackled, and I let them hypnotize me, take me away from the humiliation and desperation that knotted me up inside. I'm sorry, I stated quietly. Well, that was inappropriate of me. Please continue. We were both quiet for a long time, collecting our thoughts. I replayed everything that Edward said, his motivation with Maggie, when it had morphed to being about me. His admission of pushing me to make me pursue him had caught me off guard, and made me sad. How much of this could have been avoided if we'd just been honest up front? Would his honesty have directly influenced or negated my attraction to him? I've been reading the drafts of your paper as you leave them for Jasper. His statement broke me out of my reverie. I stared at him in shock and confusion. You were reading my dissertation. What gave you the right? I wasn't so much angry as exposed. What was in there suddenly felt very personal, as if he had been reading my journal or personal letters. The themes flashed through my mind: women holding all the power, physical and emotional vampirism, the hypocrisy of gender roles in both sexuality and life. I had projected my feelings onto the book analysis, and in doing so, had cracked both and myself wide open without realizing it. I was laid bare on those pages for the world to see. Letting Jasper read it was one thing, he didn't have context as to my epiphany. But Edward, it was suddenly all too personal, too real. I happened to see a draft lying on Jasper's desk one day. I took it without him realizing. He paused, as if waiting for me to attack. I knew how important it was to you, and I guess it was a way for me to keep track of your progress. Needless to say, I had a bit of surprise when I started reading. And what great insight did it give you, Edward? I was so turned around I didn't know which way was which. He chuckled, but it wasn't in amusement. Actually, it made me sad to see you so cynical. It may be egotistical, but I blame myself. You are not a cynic. I hated to see how your frustration and anger came through in your analysis. I sighed and shook my head. I had been mad for so long, that I never realized I wouldn't have gotten there without him. He had been right. You know what, Edward, I should thank you. You were the one who insisted that I couldn't write about Dracula, that I didn't have the experience. I came to a few pretty key insights after everything was said and done. Things that change the whole tone of my paper. Part of me is angry at you for that, but another part of me is grateful. I wouldn't have realized it if all this hadn't happened. The fingers wove back together. Steeple, relax. Steeple, relax. He completed 4 cycles before speaking again. I don't know if I deserve your thanks. I wasn't honest with you about a lot of things. Not able to handle sitting in one place, I stood and grabbed my glass off the table. The lack of food and rapid consumption of alcohol made me a little unsteady on my feet. It also gave me the courage to say what normally I would probably hold back. He wanted me to listen, well, he needed to listen too. Since we are both being honest and listening, I need to tell you a few things too. I looked up at the ceiling, searching the intricate patterns in the plaster for the right words. Before you, I'd only ever had sex with one person. And up until the last year, I thought I was going to marry him. I don't just jump into bed indiscriminately, and I realize now that I was naive to think that my expectations were the same as yours. I could have prevented this whole thing, but I decided to throw caution to the wind and have sex with a semi-stranger. I could have prevented all of this from happening, and in some ways I wish I had, but in other ways, I needed it to happen. Isabella, no, you need to hear this. I might not have handled everything the right way, but I was always honest and upfront with you. I point blank asked you who Maggie was before we ever got to your flat. You promised me that you would answer anything I asked, yet you dodged a few very important questions. I think I am justified at being hurt and confused. Yet even through all that, you are everywhere, and I can't escape from you. I tried to tune you out, but I can't. I have absolutely no control over myself when I am with you. And the only way to contain it was to force the distance to try and protect myself. I am not strong, despite what you think. I'll give in to whatever you ask of me if it means that I can be with you. And in doing so, I'm afraid that I'll try to be whatever it is that you want me to be. I don't want that, but I can't not want you either. I started toward the sideboard to get a glass of water, but my foot caught on the edge of the rug. And I lost my balance. My hands went out in an attempt to stop my fall, and my brandy snifter went flying. It hit the hardwood, shattering on impact. Damn it. Without thinking, I dropped to the floor, picking up the shards and cursing my alcohol-induced clumsiness. Edward was on his feet, moving towards me. Stop, you are going to. But he was too late, and I hissed and jerked my hand back. A bright line of red immediately welled to the surface. I dropped the glass and cradled my hand, watching as the blood seeped into my palm. Edward was at my side in a flash, a napkin dabbing at the cut. Come with me, I need to rinse this off so that I can see how deep it is. You might need stitches. I tried to pull back, clutching my hand close to my body. I wasn't sure if the protection I sought was physical or emotional, either way it had me frozen in place. If you won't move, I can carry you, which I doubt would make you happy. Now are you coming? His hand went under my elbow, balancing me as I straightened out of my crouch. I followed him mutely into the kitchen, my cut hand cradled inside the other so as not to drip blood on the floor. Edward stopped a tea in oversized sink and turned on the water before grabbing my wrist and pulling me closer. This might be cold. He gently moved my hand under the water, and I yelped at the sting. Edward stepped in behind me, his arms around my body to hold my palm in both his hands. He gently moved it under the stream of water as he analyzed the cut. It's not deep enough to need stitches. And the alcohol on the glass will likely kill any germs. Let's get some pressure on it. Once the bleeding stops, I'll put a plaster on it, and you should be good as new. He turned off the water and tore a paper towel from the roll next to the sink, wadding it and pressing it into my palm. Reaching for the paper towels required him to lean forward, and I felt the warmth of his body against my back. I relaxed against him, my body instinctively gravitating to what it perceived as warmth and comfort. I leaned my head back against his chest, and closed out any thoughts, focusing instead on the thump of his heart. The rise and fall of his chest. Slow deep breaths that created an illusion of rocking. We stood like that for a long time. Me, relishing being near Edward. Him maintaining the pressure, but never moving away. I think the bleeding has stopped, he observed quietly. It snapped me back to reality. Where we were, what had been said. The questions still hanging. I tried to step away, but Edward's arms tightened around me. Please stay. My brain and my body were back at war. It always seemed to be that way with him. The desire to stay versus the fear of the unknown. I felt absolutely helpless to resist the pull. It was stronger than my will. I miss you. The words escaped involuntarily. It wasn't a lie, but it left me feeling exposed, terrified. I miss you so much that it scares the hell out of me. But this is who I am, flaws and all. If you can't accept that, then you need to let me be. Edward let out a sigh and tightened his arms around me. I wish I had something brilliant that would mock. You believe me when I say that it was always about you. I might have played games with you, but it was always for the best of intentions. His head dropped to my shoulder and I could feel his breath warm against my neck. I didn't want to hurt you, and I honestly thought that I was protecting you but not being honest. I realize now how wrong I really was. There were a million things that I wanted to say, but they all seemed to fall short. And then it didn't matter. His lips were on my neck. One slow, gentle kiss. It took my breath away in its simplicity. Isabella, the sound of the door slamming startled us. And we jumped apart. We both looked up to see Esme and Carlyle in the kitchen doorway. Esme took one look at the bloody paper towel in my hand, and her eyes went wide. Oh Bella, are you okay? I'm fine. I tripped and dropped one of your glasses. I am so sorry. Anyway, I cut myself picking up a shard. If you can point me in the direction of a broom and dustpan I can clean it up. Nonsense, Carlyle interjected. We'll take care of it. You need to get a plaster on that. I don't want you getting infected. I already have it under control. Edward stood behind me with a box of band-aids and a tube of antibiotic ointment. He and Carlyle stared at each other intently for what seemed like an eternity, some sort of silent conversation flying between them. I could imagine how things might look to Carlyle, and I felt my face color in embarrassment. Esme broke the silence. I'll go change and get a broom. If I don't see you, have a lovely night. She left, pulling Carlyle along with her. I moved to follow her exit. The alcohol, the conversation had me all muddled, and I didn't want to make any more mistakes. Not now, when we were finally turning things around. I think I am going to turn in. Can we pick up this conversation in the morning when I don't have all this brandy in me? It doesn't seem to be helping. Edward quickly caught up to me, his hand around my wrist. The brandy gave you enough courage to be honest. And you need to get something on that so it doesn't get infected. He turned my hand over and removed the bloody paper towel. The bleeding had stopped, leaving a small cut at the base of the ring finger on my right hand. He squeezed a bit of the antibiotic ointment on the cut, and gently wrapped the band-aid around my finger. Then, he lifted my hand so that he could kiss my palm. The gesture was innocent, kind. Thank you for letting me take care of you. He sounded vulnerable, so different from the man I thought I knew. I couldn't help myself. I reached up to push his hair away from his eyes. His hand darted up and caught my wrist, turning it so he could kiss my other palm. I was frozen in place, staring at the top of his head. His hair was tousled, dark red, almost black in the low light. I wanted to kiss the spot where it whorled into a cowlick, run my hands through it. But doing that would imply a familiarity, a say of intimacy that I wasn't sure I had the right to anymore. I couldn't presume anything that wasn't stated implicitly. That much I had learned in the last few months. Edward straightened up, so that he could look directly into my eyes. He was so close that I could feel the warmth of his words on my face, smell the alcohol on his breath. It's you. It's always been you. I know that not being home street with you should make you want to believe otherwise, but it's true. I looked away, refusing to give in to the tears that were building. He said the one thing that I had desperately wanted to hear, yet I had no clue how to respond. Either in words or actions. As if sensing my confusion, Edward gently grasped my chin, forcing me to look at him. His other hand came up to wipe away the tear that escaped. Please don't cry. I hate this limbo that we are stuck in. Limbo is a good word, I whispered back. I think you're right. We both have a good bit of alcohol in us, and could use some rest. He leaned in closer, his eyes never leaving mine. May I kiss you good night? I couldn't help it. I laughed as another tear escaped. Memories of a simpler time. I don't know if we are ready for that, Edward. He smiled in response. I want to know what it feels like to have you kiss me on the lips. He was turning my words around on me in an effort to prove that he was sincere. Why now? I asked quietly. Because I want to remember what it feels like, Isabella. I miss the light that you spark in me. I couldn't respond, at a loss for what to say. I searched his face, looking for a hint of subterfuge. Anything that would warn me to stay me away. But all I saw was exhaustion and hope. Drawing a deep breath, I pulled my hand free from his grasp so that I could trace the dark circle that was so much more prominent in the shadow. Edward closed his eyes in reaction. You look so tired. I didn't sleep much last night. Please understand that I'm afraid. I broke off, unsure of what I needed to say. He sighed and opened his eyes. I could see the hurt lurking, but it didn't obscure the hope that was resident there too. He turned his head and kissed the palm of my hand once more. You say that you are scared. I understand that. I've tried to be patient, but I refuse to be anymore. I am not going away, and I am not going to let you go. Now go get some sleep. We've got a long day ahead of us tomorrow. His statement caught me off guard, as I was still floundering with our previous conversation. Yes, you want Dracula, I'll give you Dracula. We'll go chase your monster while I prove to you that you will never be second best to a ghost. All in all, it sounds like quite the tourist event, doesn't it? Edward stepped away from me, dropping my hands and turning towards the front of the house. He paused in the doorway, but didn't look back. I love you, Isabella. You may not believe it, but I do. I never told Maggie that. I never felt the need to. But I am finding there are a number of things that I need and want to do for you. And I will prove that, every single day if I have to. I was too stunned to speak. Enjoy your last night without me. It ends tomorrow. He let out as he disappeared down the hallway. The moment I couldn't see him any longer, I felt the loss. It overrode the doubt and fear I'd battled with for weeks. I couldn't resist the pull, it was stronger than anything else. He'd told me the truth. Why he did what he did, how he felt, what he wanted. I'd been honest too, and we were still standing. There was hope after all. Without thinking, I took off after him down the hallway. I took the steps 2 at a time and hit the second-floor landing, immediately looking for which direction Edward might have gone. But I'd waited too long. He wasn't there, and I didn't know what to do. I hadn't thought beyond catching up to him. I looked up and down the hallway. All I saw were closed doors. I didn't hear anything, didn't see anyone. I was rooted to the spot, unsure of what to do next. I closed my eyes and replayed our interaction in the kitchen. I had forgotten how alive Edward made me feel. Everything was in sharper contrast, as if simply him being there filtered my perceptions in a different way. I loved that feeling. As long as he was honest in saying that it really was just the two of us, it was all that really mattered. So why was I standing here in the hallway? What were my options? Either go to bed, or knock on every door until he answered. And when I found him, then what? Forget which one was yours. My eyes flew open. Edward stood in an open door directly across from my room, his hands resting on the door jamb as he leaned forward into the hallway. I was trying to decide which door to knock on first. My face colored at the admission. He straightened up and stepped out into the hallway, extending his arm. I guess I made it easy for you then. Come on. His hand was steady, palm up, waiting for me to move. I reached out, grasping his fingers as he pulled me in and shut the door. Other than the light that came from the fireplace, the room was dim. Esme just lit the fire. These old rooms get a bit drafty. We can sit there. He pointed towards the wing-back chairs that flanked the fireplace. The room was almost identical to mine. A 4-poster bed, comfortable chairs for reading, a small fireplace. There was an arrangement of wild roses in a small vase on the mantel. One of the benefits of being friends with the proprietors. I asked, inclining my head towards the flowers. No, I brought them for you. A peace offering if you will. I stepped forward so that I could run my finger along the petals. Did you take the thorns off this time? The first ones you sent me made me bleed. What is the old saying? We always hurt the ones we love. I dropped my hand to rest on the mantel. You don't know me well enough to love me. My sister likes to remind me that sometimes we spend more time questioning than accepting. This is one of those things that you need to accept, Isabella. I gave up trying to understand or rationalize it a while ago. Edward was right. There really was no explaining what existed between us. It just was. I felt his arm slip around my waist, his hand flattening against my stomach. He didn't pull me back against him, instead stepping close enough to drop his head to rest on my shoulder. I've thought about us for a long time. I questioned what odd twist of fate brought you into my life. You knocked everything off tracks, made me want to take my entire life in a different direction. That's when I realized that the world I had crafted for myself was not a life, but a prison. It is time to give it up. I can't do that without you to lead me. A knot formed in my chest. He was exposing himself, being honest in his hopes. I am not much of a leader, Edward. I get lost a lot. But at least you try. I was hoping that you could teach me. We'd probably antagonize each other to death. I felt his head shake against my shoulder. It took me a moment to realize that it was laughter. That we do. Some might consider it intellectual foreplay. Who says you will ever get into my pants again? My God, that sounded so bitchy. I always managed to say exactly what I was thinking around him, with no filter. The pressure against my stomach increased, pulling me closer into him. I could feel his breath, hot in my hair. I wouldn't be so crude as to presume anything of the nature. But you are proving my point in spades. We seem to bring out something in each other that no one else can. You make it sound like it's a mutual thing. I was sparring, delaying, trying to get my balance. It was absolutely mutual. There was no way I could ever deny that. The pressure on my stomach increased a bit more. I was flush up against him now, and his other arm slipped around my shoulders to secure me in place. He held me firmly in place, as if anticipating that I would try and escape. But there was nowhere else that I wanted to be. Is it not a mutual thing? Are you done with me? Can you turn away so easily? Edward dropped his head, burying his face in my hair. I can tell you how infuriating you are when you argue with me. And how absolutely stunning you are when you believe in or want something. How fascinating it is to watch your mind work. I love that you push me, challenge me. You don't back down like so many other people do. You make me want to explore, to know more, to question. No one else has ever done that to me. Only you. A small shiver went through me as the hand that was on my shoulder moved towards my neck, flattening out just below my collarbone. I can tell you that my heart is beating as fast as yours. Don't deny it, because I can feel it. You can argue all you want. But you can't deny this. His voice had grown huskier, and I could feel his lips move just behind my ear. Are you going to insist that it's not mutual? That you don't want me? Because you aren't pulling away from me. Isabella, you can't forget that afternoon any more than I can. You feel the connection just as much as I do. Edward's hand moved across my body, stopping at the base of my neck. It slowly slipped up my neck until he reached my chin, where he applied just enough pressure to force me to shift my head towards him. I think I'd like to kiss you on the lips, Isabella. I'd like to believe we are both ready for it this time. Before I could respond to Edward, his lips were on mine. So much like the zoo, it started out hesitant. One gentle, feather-light kiss that was over entirely too soon. And when he kissed me again, there was no longer hesitation from either of us. His hand dropped back to my shoulder, and turned me around to face him without ever breaking contact. As soon as I had finished my rotation, he had one hand cradling my face, the other grasping at the hair at the nape of my neck. It prevented me from moving away as his kisses grew more insistent. I kept expecting my fight-or-flight instinct to kick in, but I responded in full, losing myself in it all. I let him own me, manipulate me as he kissed me, sucked on my lip, stroked my face. His actions mimicking his words. He wanted me to believe, to acknowledge that I would respond to him, that I did still want him. That I needed him, not just physically, but totally. And in the course of his assault on my indignation, I let my walls down and allowed myself to believe. I kissed him back, mirroring his intensity, letting him lead, but always matching, never ceding. This wasn't about domination, of one disproving the other. It was about equality, about balance, about honesty. When I wrapped my arms up around his back and squeezed my fingers into his skin, I felt him smile. He pulled back, never losing the self-satisfied smirk that had infuriated and called to me since the first time I saw him. I told you that it wasn't one-sided. He dropped his arms and stepped away, forcing me off balance in the process. I shot my hand out to catch the arm of the chair so as not to land face first. What the fuck, Edward? He laughed, his face alight with amusement. You are so very beautiful when you are angry. I stared at him, infuriated and confused. You proved my point. You want me as much as I want you. And you infuriate me as much as I do you. There is absolutely no question about how mutual this is. Now go to bed. I'd like to leave by 9 tomorrow morning. What the hell is your game, Edward? Wind me up and watch me go. He stepped forward, closing the distance between us. His face inches from mine. He stared at my mouth, but didn't move to close the space. Wind you up, yes. You can try and deny it all you want, but actions speak louder than words, and I heard yours loud and clear. As for winding you up and watching you go, I'm actually trying to prove that I am worthy of your trust. If I didn't care about that, I wouldn't have stopped and you wouldn't be standing. My heart was beating so hard I felt like I could hear it. Anger and desire and panic all mixed together and confused with his proximity. Edward's smile grew a bit as he watched me stew. He reacted, head over my shoulder without looking away. I brought these for you. Good night, Isabella. He placed the small vase of roses and a book in my hand and stepped away. I was too flustered to speak. I was torn between storming out of the room and throwing myself at him. I knew that the latter would be rejected, regardless of how much we both wanted it. I moved quickly for the door, trying to channel every bit of sexual frustration into my irritation of him in that moment. Stop fucking with my head, Edward. I'm not fucking with your head, Isabella. I'm being honest. I promised that I would. It doesn't mean that I don't like to see you all wound up. I happen to adore every minute of it. I slammed the door behind me, shutting out his infuriating chuckle. God, it was going to be a long night. The moment I was back in my room, I set down the vase and flipped on the light to study the book Edward had given me. It was a hardback copy of Rebecca. A piece of paper jutted out from the binding. I tipped open the book, and it fell open to the marked page, as if it had been held open long enough to dent the spine. I'd recognize the handwriting on the paper anywhere. I didn't realize how much it fit until I reread it. Please look with an open mind and believe. If not my words, then hers. Edward, sitting cross-legged on the bed, I flattened the book in front of me. He'd marked the beginning of chapter 20. Where Maxim confesses his real feelings about Rebecca to the second Mrs. De Winter. 2 passages had been highlighted in yellow on the opening page. If your hand is taken from you, you don't know, for a few minutes, that your hand is gone. You go on feeling the fingers. You stretch and beat them on the air, one by one, and all the time there is nothing there, no hand, no fingers. At the moment I am nothing, I have no heart, and no mind, and senses. I flipped the page, reading only the highlighted sections. You don't love me, he said, that's why you did not feel anything. I know, I understand. It's come too late for you, hasn't it? No, I said. This ought to have happened 4 months ago, he said. I should have known. Women are not like men. I want you to kiss me again, I said, please Maxim. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony of that passage. We'd said such similar things, albeit innocently. I flipped the page, looking for more highlighted sections, wondering what other parallels he might have called out. How could I come to you when you were thinking about Rebecca? Whenever you touched me I thought you were comparing me to Rebecca, I said. Whenever you spoke to me or looked at me, walked with me in the garden, sat down to dinner, I felt you were saying to yourself, this I did with Rebecca, and this and this. You despise me, don't you? You can't understand my shame, and loathing, and disgust. Reading the highlights, knowing what had passed between us, I had to laugh. It was as if the names were changed to protect the innocent. Although innocent was a relative term. I closed the book and placed it on the nightstand. Normally I would have read more, analyzed the content, tried to understand more of Edward's intent. But this was my life, not a book. I needed to stop treating it that way. In the dark, the room was oddly quiet. No sounds of a house settling, water running, people talking. That, combined with the soft, cold sheets reinforced the fact that I was in fact alone. Only one body would generate warmth in this bed tonight. I curled up on my side and hugged one of the down pillows to my chest, a weak attempt at inferring comfort or companionship. Instead of providing a sense of security, it simply emphasized the fact that I was by myself when I very much didn't want to be. The easy assumption would be sexual frustration. That my desire to run back across the hallway and finish what Edward had started drove my inability to relax into sleep. But it was more than that. I wanted him here, with me. And it wasn't for sex or comfort or fear of being alone. I wanted to feel the weight of his body against my back as he curled around me. To have him talk to me, tell me stories about his childhood, about what he'd been like when he was little. Nothing of consequence, but everything of importance. After an hour of tossing and turning I threw off the covers and quietly opened my door. The house was silent. There was no light from under Edward's door. Was he lying there in the dark, unable to sleep too? Or was he happily wrapped up in his bed, dreaming of who knew what? I slipped down the stairs and made my way towards the library. Earlier I had noticed a section of newer books, where I hoped to find a mindless bestseller that could lull me into sleep. I moved ahead quietly, so lost in my own thoughts, I didn't realize someone else was in the room until I had already cleared the threshold. Not wanting to disturb him, I tried to retreat quietly, but the squeak of a floorboard gave away my presence. Carlyle glanced up, and motioned me into the room. Please, Bella, come join me. Not wanting to be rude, I sat down in the chair I had occupied early in the day. His smile was welcoming, and if I didn't know any better, I would have thought he was expecting me. I'm really sorry about breaking your glass. It was an inane statement, yet I was at a loss as to how to initiate the conversation I'd like to have. He laughed and shook his head. Really, it's not an issue. You don't want to know how many we go through in a year. Alcohol brings out the clumsiness in people. Something had been eating away at the back of my mind since our conversation earlier. I fidgeted with my t-shirt as I tried to figure out how to broach the subject. This might be my only chance to ask, but I wasn't sure how to proceed. Carlisle, do you mind if I ask you something about Maggie? His expression didn't change in the least. He could have just been asked to predict who would win Wimbledon this year. I thought you might want to talk about her at some point. What would you like to know? There was no easy way to ask what I wanted to know. Better simply to ask than second-guess myself continuously. Did her parents not do anything to help her? I mean, when they found out she was sick. The comments about her upbringing and how quickly she died after her diagnosis had always bothered me. Not that I was the walking font of knowledge on leukemia, but there were plenty of people who had lived through it. I couldn't understand how in this day and age, someone could be diagnosed and die so quickly after. It just didn't make sense. Uncle Liam was a bit extreme in his views, and believed that life was to be lived based on the hand you were dealt. That meant no medicine, no vaccinations, and no physical changes like braces or glasses. Making that decision as an informed adult is one thing, but to bring a child up under those beliefs is a very different issue altogether. He took a long breath, as if collecting his thoughts. Maggie was a very sweet, loving girl. She was very beautiful in her own way, as are you. But she never developed the thick skin necessary to survive the slings and arrows of childhood. She had a fragile, almost ethereal way about her, and never truly adjusted to life here. People are cruel by nature, but children can be inhuman, especially to those they deem different. It reminded me of something Edward had said in his letter. I was her Lancelot. I had always interpreted the statement in a romantic context. Had he meant it to be simpler? That he had been her protector, her champion. She was quite the mess after Edward left for university. I think deep down she knew it wasn't meant to be. They would have grown apart as they got older, they were just too different. When she found out when she was sick, it was easier to push him away than know that he gave up everything to try and help her out of duty. She was too proud to allow that. She wanted his love, not his pity. Carlisle, you make it sound like she gave up and died. I was shocked. I couldn't imagine not fighting. There was too much to experience in life. In a manner of speaking, she did. Maggie didn't have the courage or the will that we do. She simply didn't know any other way. Fighting the disease would have meant fighting her parents, who meant the world to her. It would have meant going against what she was raised to believe. If I told you that you had to go against something you believed with every fiber of your being to live, would you? To me, the answer was easy, of course I would. But then again, I wasn't Maggie. I never would be, and I finally realized that I didn't want to be. I had spent so much time hating her, resenting her existence, that I was unprepared for the pity, no, the empathy that I felt for Maggie at the moment. I struggled to reconcile the mental demon I had conjured in my mind with the sheltered little girl who never stood a chance in life. I'd spent so much time resenting Maggie, building her up as my enemy, that I never taken the time to consider that she was just as flawed, if not more so than I was. Carlisle's voice broke me away from my thoughts. I'm sorry, did you say something? His smile was gentle. He stood and moved towards the library door. I'm turning in, Bella. Is there anything that you'll need? Instead of answering, I stood to follow Carlisle out of the room while turning his comments over in my mind. We parted at the steps. Apparently Carlisle and Esme's rooms were in a separate wing of the house. I impulsively threw my arms around his neck and hugged him hard. Carlisle seemed to be a bit thrown by the contact, but after a moment of awkwardness, returned my hug in kind. I'm glad you are here, Bella. Me too, Carlisle. Thank you. I found my way back to my room and climbed into bed. While the bed was just as cold as it was before, I slipped easily into sleep easily. The alcohol and emotional exhaustion took the edge off restless nights and overthinking. Instead of waking multiple times, I got the first good night's rest in weeks. That is until the sun came streaming into my eastern-facing room, bringing with it a dull throb that comes from too much alcohol consumption. I rolled over and smashed the pillow to my face, incapable of getting up to close the drapes. Too damn bright. My head hurt, my eyes were dry. And my mouth felt like I had brushed my teeth in weeks. My body cried for water, but my head insisted that I not move. Unfortunately, a knock at the door negated that option. Unless you are God, the President, or my mother intent on making my life hell, you had better go away, I called into the pillow as I heard the door swing open and footsteps cross the room. What a lovely way to greet the person who brings you relief. I pulled the pillow away from my eyes. Edward stood at the foot of my bed holding a tray. The dark shadows were gone, and with it, all traces of the haunted man who confronted and infuriated me last night. The smirk, the polish, the devil-may-care attitude were back in full force. Pushing up off the pillow, I caught the scent of something heavenly. It erased all irritation at him being here so early in the morning, put together and seemingly unaffected by last night. Please tell me you have something revoltingly unhealthy on that tray that is swimming in butter or gravy. I scraped my hair off my neck and struggled free of the covers to sit cross-legged on the bed. First, this. Edward handed me a glass of orange juice and small blue tablets. Heathen, ibuper, often in hangover application is always chased by alcohol. Old wives' tale. I'm a doctor, I know better. He pushed my arm a bit. Drink. I popped the pills into my mouth and took a tentative sip of orange juice. Edward nudged my arm, pushing me to drink more. Stop it or I might upchuck on you, I mumbled as I took another tentative sip. Your bedside manner sucks. Such lovely words for the man who brings you breakfast in bed. He shot back. I placed the glass back on the tray, and slowly moved to the edge of the bed. God, I feel like something died in my mouth. The floor was cold under my feet. And I held onto the end table as I stood hesitantly. Promise me that you'll never let me drink brandy ever again. Please. You know, there are things worse in life than a brandy hangover, like scotch and cigar. Edward's smile was wicked, almost conspiratorial. I couldn't sleep, and snuck outside after raiding Carlyle's stash. A dead skunk in your mouth tastes better. Now eat, it did wonders for me. I must have turned green. He spun me around and pushed me in the direction of the bathroom. The walk did me a world of good. So did a good brushing of the teeth and cold water on my face. When I returned, I found Edward lounging on the bed as if it were the most natural thing in the world. His long legs stretched out with ankles crossed in front of him, a few pillows propped up behind his head. With the paper in one hand, a cup of coffee in the other, he looked like an advertisement in a travel magazine. A gorgeous man in faded jeans and a snug polo shirt relaxing on a slept-in bed in a beautiful room. It sure would have gotten my attention. He looked up to see me frozen in the bathroom door. That infuriating smirk slipped into place. Come on, Isabella. I don't bite, I only nibble a bit. He patted the bed next to him, never losing that arrogant smile. I could see sausage and toast on the tray next to him, calling to me. Grease wins over pride any day. Especially when a hangover is involved. I climbed back into bed and grabbed a link of the plate. The minute the sausage hit my mouth, I closed my eyes and sighed in contentment. Iron and caffeine, just what the doctor ordered. I take it you approve. The food had been my sole focus, and I gave Edward a sheepish smile of gratitude while holding one finger in the air to request a second to chew. Sorry, that was rude. I do feel more human. I took a quick sip of coffee before continuing. No one has ever brought me breakfast in bed before. Thank you. You know, I should question your taste in men, but that am I. GHT lump me in with blokes I'd rather not know about. Now finish your breakfast and get a move on. We have places to go. I had totally forgotten about our expedition. I wonder if we'd go straight to the Abbey. Or check some of the other spots first. There was the church and the library and... Look at you, lit up like a child on Christmas Eve. Edward moved the tray to the bedside table, and then leaned in towards me. You'll see firsthand all the places you've read about. And I can promise you that while I am intent on proving that you can trust me, don't confuse my actions today with anything platonic or chivalrous. My thoughts about you are nowhere near that civil or contained. He raised his hand to skim just underneath my jaw. Expect to be touched a lot today. I've missed it too. UCH to not take advantage of your proximity. My mouth literally fell open as Edward stood to leave the room. 45 minutes, Isabella. Not even an hour into the day and he had me totally off balance already. I could feel the irritation building. Every instinct was to lash out, and I was scrambling for a smart aleck comment, when it hit me. He was doing exactly what he'd always done. I had thought it was pushing my buttons. Baiting me, but I was wrong. He wasn't trying to change me or goad me, and his actions weren't malicious. He was flirting with me. Granted, he had a weird way of doing it. But that's what it had been all along. I was the one who had twisted it around into something slightly malevolent or dark in intention. He was simply getting a rise out of me, because I did it to him in turn. Dropping back on the bed, I pulled a pillow over my face to muffle a scream. It was going to be a ridiculously long day. After taking a nice cold shower to cool me off and wake me up, I flew through my typical morning ministrations. Blow-drying my hair, putting on a tiny bit of makeup, throwing on clothes. One quick look in the mirror made me smile. I might not have paid attention to what I packed. But it's better to be lucky than good, because I had actually thrown things into my bag that could give as good as I got. At 9 a.m. on the nose, I ran down the stairs to find Edward waiting for me in the foyer. His eyes raked down me quickly, and I pulled in a quick gasp of breath as he flashed that wicked grin. Anticipation hummed through me, and I was half terrified, half giddy at the prospect of a full day together. He held up my coat. "You'll need this. It gets windy on the hill." I turned and slipped my arms into the sleeves and shrugged it in place. As soon as the jacket was on, Edward slipped his hand under my hair, pulling it free from the inside of my coat. His thumb ghosting underneath the edge of my sweater as he did, trailing up of the back of my neck before pulling away. The entire gesture was a combination of sweet and provocative at the same time, and I shivered in reaction. "Are you ready for our ghost and monster extravaganza?" he asked innocently. I turned around to see him smiling at me. A real smile. No smirk, no sarcasm. Just honestly happy. It made the knot of anticipation tighten a bit. That smile was for me. "Do I need to pack a cross and some garlic for protection?" I teased, struggling to rein in my reaction. He was trying to prove a point. I needed to respect that. "All depends on what you need to be protected from." Edward stepped closer, our bodies almost touching. I tried to bite back a smile, but it was no use. "Why, are you offering your services?" We were froze in place, grinning like two idiots. I hadn't realized how much I had missed the banter, the laughter, the teasing. I felt so alive. "You will be the death of me yet, won't you, Isabella?" His words were serious, but the smile never faded. "Would you have it any other way?" Edward slipped his hand in mine and tugged me towards the door. He didn't answer my question. I didn't expect him to. Our drive into town was quiet, but not awkward. It gave me an opportunity to regroup, collect myself. It was hard enough to control my thoughts around him, let alone in this car. I couldn't help but think of the last time we were here together. Edward reached Deconstructing Dracula, page, Monster 4, 198, over and grabbed my hand, placing it on the stick shift. I immediately looked at the window so that he couldn't see my face color at the memory. I had forgotten how good it felt to step out of safe and predictable. To let myself go and let life happen. I couldn't look at Edward in the driver's seat and not remember every moment of it. He squeezed my hand as he downshifted. Apparently I wasn't the only one lost in a memory. We parked close to the water, and Edward was around to my side of the car, door open before I could let myself out. He offered me his hand to steady myself as I climbed out of the car. Once I was standing, he turned my hand over and leaned down to kiss the cut on my hand. He pulled me forward, leading me through the narrow winding streets, pointing out the local sights. The giant whalebone arch, the Dracula Museum. "Come on, we'll explore the harbor first. Then we can have lunch and take the steps." The steps, the church and the abbey ruins. It felt absolutely surreal to be in the place I had all but obsessed over for the past few years. All the things I had read about, visualized, were finally becoming a reality, not something I had to paint with my imagination. Yet it all faded to the background. My dream paled in comparison. It seemed to be happening a lot these days. Edward graciously spent the morning playing tour guide. He prov. IDED a running commentary on the part of Whitby I didn't know. The whaling industry at the turn of the century, the lighthouses, the local personalities. It gave me a chance to see a different side of him. He was lighter. He laughed as he told me silly stories. He greeted people he knew with a wave or hello. It was like seeing another side to him, another facet. I didn't know this Edward who guide. Ed me around puddles while laughing at how I said pasta. I was hit with another flash of our day at the zoo. The memories of him laughing, teasing, and cracking jokes. How long would it be before things like this became mundane, expected? Would he ever stop surprising me? Edward was good to his promise. Every possible chance he was touching me. His hand at the small of my back. An arm around my shoulders. Holding my hand. Deconstructing Dracula. Page. Monster 4. 199. Nothing inappropriate, but constant contact. Every touch was innocent, yet held the inference of something more, and kept me on edge in the best way possible. Anticipation of what came next. A kiss, a statement, a declaration. I didn't know when or what it would be, but I was confident that at some point it would come, which made the anticipation all that much more enjoyable. The skies opened up close to noon and sent us running for cover. We sprinted through the streets, dodging people in a quest for shelter. Edward stopped short, opening a door as I crashed into the back of him and bounced off with a grunt. He grabbed my hand and pulled me inside a dark pub. You would think, as much as I keep getting caught in the rain, I'd permanently attach an umbrella to my wrist. I laughed as I shook water out of my hair. What, are you used to somewhere that has sunshine and warm weather? Such a yank, Edward teased as he led me through the dark room. We can wait it out here. Come on, a little hair of the dog and some more grease should do the trick. He pulled a chair out for me. I thought you weren't going to be chivalrous today. Actions don't belie thoughts, Isabella. He leaned in closer, and my breath caught. He was so close, and it would be so easy to lean in and kiss him. I'd wanted to desperately since we left this house this morning. But I hadn't worked up the courage. But if you'd like me to. Edward. A man's voice broke our little corner of quiet. Edward's eyes narrowed in irritation as he glared up at the speaker. Hello, Ben. A dark-haired man that appeared to be around Edward's age stood a few feet from the table, pint in hand. He smiled as if he'd spotted a long-lost friend. I didn't realize you were back. How long are you back this time? I thought your parents were on holiday. Edward's tone was cool and abrupt, indicating his irritation at the interruption. Just up visiting Carlisle and Esme. If you'll excuse us. But Ben was not put off, and stepped forward, oblivious to the dismissal. Why are you being such a wank? I haven't seen you in ages. Come on, introduce me to your. A look of shock registered on his face. His eyes flickered back and forth between Edward and me, as if searching for an explanation, before quickly backing away. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'll leave you to be. Edward muttered something under his breath about idiots as he rubbed his forehead in irritation. What was that all about? He stood, not meeting my eyes. Give me a minute, I am going to take care of something and order lunch. Quote, Edward moved quickly away from the table after the retreating figure. I replayed the scene in my head. The greeting, Edward's brusqueness, Ben's reaction. And it all clicked into place. Ben's reaction wasn't to Edward, it was to me. I was stupid not to even consider it. If they were the same age, they probably grew up together. Which meant that he more than likely knew Maggie. I can't begin to imagine what we looked like to an outsider. Maggie dropped back down over me, like a ghost I couldn't escape. Would it always be like this? Would I ever get free of her or of others' memories of her? I sat at the table, lost in my own ruminations. I wasn't sure how long it was before Edward returned to our table holding 2 pints. Gone was the relaxed, happy man from earlier. No smile, no easy laugh. I sat quietly, allowing him time to collect his thoughts. How could I have been so naive? Of course things would be strange here, of all places. I should have known better than to allow him to do this. It wasn't fair to either of us. Edward, but he cut me off before I could continue. I'm sorry about that. I didn't really, well, it was strange to hear him fumble for words. No, I'm the one that should be sorry. I never stopped to think about how people might react to us, or at least what they see of me. It was selfish, and I should have known better. We can leave, it's okay. He ran his hand through his hair in irritation. No, it's not okay. We are going to go about our day just like I'd intended. Some small-minded village idiot isn't going to ruin this for us. We sat quietly, drinking and waiting for our food. There was something I felt like I needed to say, to get out on the table so to speak, and now seemed to be as good a time as any. I'm always going to live in her shadow, aren't I? In some way, there will always be 3 of us in this relationship. Even if one is a ghost. I didn't have the courage to say it more than a whisper. Maybe it was fear of the answer. More likely, my resignation to the fact that this might end everything before it ever started. Edward laughed quietly, but there was no joy in the sound. He eached up to push a strand of hair away from my eyes. No, Isabella, the only way that would happen is if you let it. I don't care what others see or think. I know what you are to me. What am I, Edward? He'd made his declaration, but I needed to know more. I wanted to understand. I don't know if I have that totally figured out yet. But I like what I have figured out so far. He hesitated, smiling. I know that you are smart and stubborn and incredibly attractive. You talk funny. You don't believe in yourself anywhere near as much as you should. You manage to occupy my every waking moment, even when you shouldn't. And I can't help but feel optimistic that you use the words "us" in relationship. I didn't meet his gaze, choosing instead to trace the wood grain patterns in the table to mask the impact of his words. He was holding true to his promise, proving to me that this was real. The barmaid stepped in before he could say anything more, depositing fish and chips in front of us. We both focused on demolishing the food, not re-engaging in conversation. There were so many things that hung, unspoken between us. Things that I wanted to say, but simply didn't know how to put it into words. By the time we'd finished eating, the rain had stopped. The skies were still dark, as if threatening to open up again. Do you want to drive up that way if it starts raining? No, I've dreamed about this for too long. Come on. I grabbed his hand and started forward, but Edward followed. I looked back over my shoulder, and registered a look on his face I'd never seen before. It looked like sadness. Edward. Hearing his name seemed to shake him out of whatever thought he was in. He stepped forward, leading me up the street. Since we are being honest, may I ask you something as well? Sure. Edward walked beside me, quiet for a long time, as if framing out his thoughts. What happens when you finish your dissertation? I have to defend it. That's not what I meant, Isabella. What happens? Will you stay in the States? Will you come back to London? He was asking me the one question that I couldn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know. I'm honestly not sure. I've been so focused on getting my doctorate that I kind of lost sight of what comes after that. You've spent so much time chasing the monster, you never stopped to think what happened once you caught him. There were so many ways to interpret his statement. Dracula, my dissertation, Edward, my own fears, my future. They all fit in some manner or form. Something like that. We climbed the steps in silence. And for once, I could not have cared less that I was in the heart of Whitby, just steps from the Abbey. Because all of a sudden it all seemed so unimportant. Come on, the graveyard is over here. We wandered through the stones, studying the inscriptions. He was silent as I read the messages on the different markers. The Humpty Dumpty grave, Tom Thumb, the little boy who fell off the harbor wall. While I tried to focus on his stories, I couldn't help but realize that everywhere we turned we were hit in the face by his past or my future, neither of which would make our relationship easy. If only there was a way that we could lock ourselves in the moment, it would only be us, with nothing else flitting around the edges. Ghosts, monsters, demons. Call them what you will. I just wanted them all to go away. The wind began to pick up as we cleared the crest of the hill. The Abbey stood out, empty and foreboding against the dark sky. I ran ahead of Edward, stopping to stare up at the crumbling ruin. The wall was cool to the touch, and I stood quietly, eyes closed as I tried to conjure a mental image of what it might have been like centuries ago. Of the monster that Stoker had written about. But all I could see were 3 children running and laughing in the summer sun. A gust of wind tore in off the water. The ancient stones provided little protection from the wind as it whipped in off the ocean. I dropped my hand and pulled my coat closer, an attempt to shelter myself. Against what? I was unsure. The sadness of the ruins. The legend that had been spun from these ancient walls. Maybe it was the man next to me, whose mere presence challenged everything. There are no ghosts here, Isabella. No monsters. No answers. Edward called from behind me. Chunks of limestone and old stories. Are you happy now? Did you find what you were looking for? I didn't know how to answer. How had my life spun so radically out of control? I came to London to finish my dissertation. To start the next stage of my life. But finishing it required me to go back to Chicago. Which meant that what I felt, what I wanted wouldn't work. And that was when it came crashing down on me. I did love him. I was just so busy second-guessing and doubting myself that it got lost. I knew what I wanted, what I needed. I stood at a fork in the road. I had to choose. Indecision was no longer an option. It was unfair to everyone. Especially to me. Isabella stopped questioning. Love. Just live. Just live. It really was that simple. Don't give up. Don't settle. Don't run away. Live. I wanted to live. And I needed to start right now. I need to go back. Please take me back. There weren't answers here. They'd been inside me all along. I'd been too busy fighting everything to realize that. I dropped my hand from the stone. And turned to face Edward. The wind whipped my hair around my face and stung my eyes. I tossed my head in an effort to clear my vision. You're right. There are no ghosts. And the monsters are just made-up stories. You are real, and you're here. And I am a fool for being afraid. I can't promise to know what happens next. I am sorry for everything I put you through, and my refusal to listen. I took a long breath and stepped closer to Edward. I want to go back to the way we were before everything else came crashing in. Before Mike showed up, before I saw the picture of Maggie. Back to when it was just the two of us and nothing else mattered. I reached out to place my hand on his chest, directly over his heart, and stood up on tiptoe. His head was bowed to keep the wind out of his eyes. And it closed the distance enough that I could kiss him gently. I needed to be the one to make the effort. I was the one that had pushed him away, and needed to be the one to make it right. Will you take me back? A low rumble of thunder in the distance broke the silence that hung between us. I stood quietly, waiting for him to respond, waiting for him to say something, anything. Edward pushed my hair back away from my face, his hand lingering at the back of my head. Why would I have to take you back, Isabella? I never let you go. We half walked, half ran back to the harbor, hand in hand. The thunder continued its ominous rumbling, warning us that the rain wouldn't be far behind. We made it to the car just as a loud crack of thunder erupted overhead, and I yelped in surprise. Edward laughed happily, shaking his head as he deactivated the alarm and opened the door for me. Once inside, I leaned forward as a bolt of lightning streaked horizontally across the sky. It all seemed so perfect, so keeping with the atmosphere. It was beautiful and wild and unpredictable and absolutely exhilarating. I love the way you observe things. It's like you are a child seeing something for the first time. Edward sat back in his seat, one arm propped against the door, watching me. I smiled and shifted my gaze back out the window. It is all new, and it's amazing. It's just a bolt of lightning. He teased, skeptical of my awe. It's a beautiful bolt of lightning across a menacing sky, and it makes me think of at least 5 classic works of British literature. Quit being such a cynic and let me indulge my inner romantic here. I folded my arms and rested them on the dashboard, supporting my chin as I watched the storm roll in across the water. The clouds were dark gray with tinges of green, and would light up periodically as a jagged edge of light ripped through them. It was violent yet beautiful in its simple elegance. While you might find the storm beautiful, I've had to watch and resist the temptation that is you all day. I am far too impatient to tolerate your wonder any longer. I promise I'll bring you back here again. I angled my head so that my cheek could rest on my arm. It allowed me to see Edward's face and the small smile that played across his lips. He wasn't toying with me, he was being honest. I couldn't help but smile at him. Promise. A chance to try again. He fired up the engine as I leaned back in my seat. He shifted into reverse, and looked over his shoulder preparing to back out. Before I could register, he ped the car in neutral and leaned towards me. Edward's face was inches from mine, and my breath caught at what might come next. His arm shot over my shoulder as he smiled. You didn't fasten your lap belt. He pulled the strap across my body, snapping the clip into place. That irritating smirk in place the entire time. I was flustered at his proximity, and he knew it. That's better. Wouldn't want anything to happen when we are just getting started again, would we now, Isabella? Starting again reminded me of something that had nagged at my subconscious all day. I'd wanted to ask a few times, but had been struggling with the proper context in which to bring it up. Edward, can I ask you a question? I believe you just did, but somehow, I don't think that's the one you meant. I shook my head and sighed in mock exasperation. Was he like this with everyone or just me? When you tried to stop me outside my flat you called me Bella. Why did you stop? Edward's eyes narrowed as he stared straight ahead, a muscle working in his jaw. I held my breath, waiting, not sure how to interpret his lack of response. Do you really not know? He asked quietly, never looking away from the road. I searched my memory, trying to pull back the events of the day. It was all such a jumbled mess, and I couldn't separate who said what from my own chaotic thoughts. No, what did you say to me when I called you Bella? I don't know. I was confused, not understanding where he was going with his line of questioning. He chuckled quietly, shaking his head. There was no joy in the sound. You told me I didn't have the right to call you Bella. And truth be told, you were right. It wasn't appropriate for me to call you Bella after the way I toyed with you, even though it's how I think of you. After that day you always will be. I guess I've merely been respecting your request. I'd never stopped to consider that the decision to resume calling me Isabella had anything to do with what I wanted. I'd just assumed it was his decision. Never again would I begin to assume where he and I were concerned. If I told you it was okay, that you could call me Bella, would you? Edward turned onto the road that led to Dunsley Hall. The muscle in his jaw working again. I couldn't tell if he was caught up in thought, angry, or something else. There was so much still to learn about him. I don't know, Isabella. Maybe you'll just have to take a chance and find out. He pulled into the gravel courtyard. I had my seat belt unbuckled and was leaning across the console before he stopped the car. I kissed his cheek innocently, trying not to laugh as he broke into a smile again. Simplicity in the smallest things. I think it's okay if you want to call me Bella, I whispered against his cheek. Although I have to admit, I kind of like the way it sounds when you say Isabella. It's something special that only belongs to you. He turned his head to catch my lips, his hand slipping up to cradle my face as he kissed me quickly. I tried to extend it, but Edward pulled away, a devilish grin on his face as he ran his thumb along my lower lip. Think you can be quiet? Let's see if we can sneak in without getting caught. I have other things on my mind than having a long drawn-out conversation with Esme right now. We left the car as quietly as we could and made our way towards the front door. Edward slipped Ed in as I pulled off my shoes and followed. He quietly latched the door, and peeked out into the entry hall to check for people. Once we were sure the coast was clear, we took off in a run towards the stairs. I giggled as I slipped on a step, but Edward caught my elbow to stabilize me. His other hand flew to my mouth to muffle any sounds. Instinctively, I made a face of apology before righting myself and following him up the steps. Another quick glance up and down the corridor guaranteed that the coast was clear to sneak down the second-floor hallway. Come with me, Edward whispered as he opened his door and pulled me inside. He closed the door behind him, and Edward turned to face me. I stood in the center of his room, unnerved by the sudden realization that we were back to the point we had left off at weeks ago. It was time to repair the final bit of damage so that we could move ahead, but I was unsure how best to proceed. Whether it was apparent in my stance, or my lack of motion. Edward picked up on my trepidation and didn't approach me. Instead he sat down on the edge of the bed, leaning back on his elbows as if us being here together was the most natural thing in the world. I can see the wheels turning. What is running through that fantastic imagination of yours? He asked quietly, his eyes never leaving my face. Glancing around, I tried to take everything in. It was just a room. There was nothing personal here. Nothing to be afraid of. He sat up and held his hand out to me. Come here. When I didn't move, he repeated his request, understanding my hesitation. Come to me, Isabella. There is nothing here that can hurt you. I couldn't move. As much as I wanted to move ahead, I had to make sure that everything was on the table before we went any further. Are you sure about that, Edward? Is there anything else? I let my words trail off, unsure of what or how to ask. Is there anything else? What? Anything else that you need to know about me? His words were cold, caustic, and I immediately regretted speaking my mind. He pushed up off the bed and took a step towards me. The motion was graceful, almost feline, and absolutely predatory. I shivered a bit at the thought. Let's make this easy, shall we? He reached around and pulled something out of his back pocket, and held it out to me. My wallet. I believe you'll find my ID, credit cards, money, a photo of my sister. And a piece of paper with important dates. Rather mundane, is it not? He waited for me to take it. When I didn't, he tossed the wallet on the table. Very well then, let's continue. If you look in my bag, you'll find clothes, my laptop and a journal. If you dig in the side pocket of the bag, you'll find a pack of gum and condoms. Any questions? My eyes went wide at his last statement, and I shook my head vigorously without thinking. He laughed at my reaction. Don't begin to think I considered you a sure thing. I like to consider myself an optimist and to be prepared for any eventuality. Despite outward appearances, he stepped back away from me to reach over his shoulder and grasp the neck of his polo shirt. Holding my gaze, he pulled the shirt over his head and tossed it onto the bed. I got this once I finished medical school. A reminder of the power and commitment of what I was about to undertake. Edward angled his body so that I could see his left shoulder. I ached up to trace the intertwined serpents on the caduceus. So many little things I'd missed completely or misunderstood. This being one of them. It made me wish that I could go back and change so much. I said it once, and I will say it again. There will be no foregone conclusions on either of our parts. If you touch me again, you can't run away. If you do it again, I won't stand by and wait a second time. I trust you not to repeat your mistakes. You need to trust that I won't repeat mine either. I ran my finger across the outline of the serpent again, trying to imagine a younger Edward, eyed Elastic in the new life he was about to begin. His right hand was out in a flash, grabbing hold of my wrist before I could finish tracing the outline of the tattoo. I mean it, Bella. Do not touch me again unless you plan on staying. The ferocity of his expression, the tone of his voice cut me to the quick. He was just as scared as I was. But he had faith in me. He was trusting that I wouldn't run away again. I'm sorry, I whispered, hating the knowledge of what I'd done. I closed the distance between us as quickly as I could, slipping my arm around his waist and leaned my forehead against his back. He didn't pull away, but I could feel the tension in his stance. Pushing up on tiptoe, I kissed the center of the caduceus. I'm sorry. Neither of us were right in how we handled things, but we can't take them back either. I pressed another kiss against his shoulder. I won't run away, I promise. This is the only place that I want to be. I shifted to lay my cheek against Edward's back. His heart was a steady staccato against my cheek. I'm not going anywhere. It was quiet, but I knew Edward heard me. His hand slipped over the top of mine, fingers twining together. Lifting his free arm, he pulled me under and around in front of him. The arm that had been raised dropped to my shoulders, securing me in place. I couldn't run, nor did I want to. We stood face to face, all pretenses and defenses stripped away. No more walls to hide behind. What had he said? No more ghosts, no more demons. It was true. For the first time since we met, we were truly alone. You can look in my wallet if you want, I started. Looking directly into his eyes. I lied on my ID. I weigh more than I told the DMV. The folded up news clipping is of my dad receiving some Rotary Club award a few years ago. He hates it, but I think it nails him perfectly. My thoughts were in chaos, but I plowed ahead, not stopping for fear of losing my courage. I am not totally sure what I packed. I just threw stuff in. Odds are I have mismatched socks and things that don't fit anymore. I wasn't quite thinking when I made my plan to come up here. But I can tell you, I don't have any gum or condoms, so I guess it's a good thing that one of us is prepared for any eventuality. Like bad breath, Edward smiled as he ran the back of his hand along my jaw. I wasn't tall enough to kiss Edward without him leaning over, even on tiptoes. So I pressed a single kiss against his chest, and then turned to rest my ear against his heart. It's beating fast, I observed, closing my eyes and focusing on the steady thumping. You tend to have that effect. He slipped his hands into my hair, and tugged gently, forcing me to lean back so that he could kiss my forehead. My eyes, my left cheek and then my right. He had me locked in place. But I didn't try to escape. I didn't want to. I don't have any tattoos. There wasn't a need for me to continue, but I felt like I should say more. I kind of have a phobia about needles. I did get a henna one once and looked like an idiot. Edward laughed softly. His face was inches from mine, but it might as well have been miles. I had physically gone as far as I could. The next move would have to be his. For all that we had been through, the honesty, the declarations, there was an awkwardness to our physical interactions. We were still learning. You are killing me. You've been killing me all day. Could you please kiss me? I can't take much more of this, and I can't reach you, I asked, feeling the warmth rush to my face. It felt strange to ask for something so blatantly. Is that all you want? His eyes never left my face. We need to start somewhere, right? My arms tightened around his waist, pulling him as close to me as I could. Can you meet me halfway? Edwa. Rhodes smiled and slowly dropped his head down towards me. He stopped just short of my lips, his eyes still holding mine. I'm not going to stop this time, he stated softly before pressing his lips gently to mine. The day of teasing, of innocent touches and emotional declarations had worn me down, and my ability to resist was gone. I attacked, forcing his kiss to evolve as I opened my mouth and breathed him in. I couldn't move fast enough, push far enough, and Edward met me with the same force, his tongue darting into my mouth, teasing, then withdrawing. I wanted more, but I let Edward lead me where he wanted to go. I didn't have to establish our equality, it was already there. I understood. More importantly, I trusted that he wanted the same things that I did. Yet no matter how much I opened myself up, had faith in the progress we made, I was unable to prepare myself for the physical intensity of what Edward made me feel. It erased all logic, any fear or hesitancy. I couldn't get enough of him kissing me, touching me. The infuriating way he would chuckle when I'd grab onto him to prevent him from pulling away or stopping. Our first time, our only time together, had been about magnetism. The call of something that couldn't be explained. I had been so unsure of myself, of who I was, and how Edward fit into the equation, that I'd been afraid to act. I understood now that his questions, his constant querying of what I wanted had nothing to do with his own insecurities and fears, and everything to do with his understanding of mine. He'd understood how far out of the comfort zone I had moved due to the force of this indescribable magnetism. Every question, every request that day had been about me. He'd done everything he could to make sure that I was comfortable, that I knew how much I was wanted. The realization stung. Yet another thing that I'd missed, another sign of how real we were. We are. What are you smiling about? Edward whispered against my neck. I had a eureka moment. Are you going to share? No, but I might show. I pushed gently on his chest, forcing him backwards. He sat back on the bed, pulling me along with him. I gracelessly fell over onto the mattress, laughing at the childish nature of it all. I like the way it sounds when you laugh. He shifted so that he could lie next to me on the bed. I feel like we've been here before. In a way we have. But things are a bit different now. Really. Edward propped his head up on his hands so that he could look down at me. Such as, if I recall, I was the one half naked last time, and we'd already had one go in the car. He laughed as his hand slid up my stomach to gently squeeze my breast. Ah yes, and if I recall correctly, when you were in the car you were fully clothed and not complaining. I might complain now. Why is that? How do I articulate things that I had a hard time understanding myself? Sit up. My demand caught Edward by surprise, and he frowned before rolling onto his back and moving to sit cross-legged. Not giving myself time to second guess, I climbed into his lap, my arms wrapped tightly around his neck. One eyebrow went up in surprise, but he didn't speak. Quote, I might complain now because I've wasted too much time. It might not be the smartest thing, and it might be rushing, but I don't want to wait for when the time might be right. I can't seem to articulate what I feel right now. But I think I can show you, and I want you to know, if you are willing. I held my breath, waiting for him to respond. Each passing second of silence felt like an hour. Would he turn me away again? Tell me it was too soon. Was I rushing this? And then all fear was erased. I felt Edward's hand slide up under my sweater, his fingers slowly trailing along my back. The contact sent chills down my spine, and I bit my lip to keep any sound from escaping. His hand continued its path until he reached my bra. Without breaking eye contact, he easily popped it open and slid one finger slowly underneath the loosened band around to the front of my body. Only if I can show you too, he whispered before kissing me again. His hand continued its path, pushing my bra up out of the way, palming my breast and slowly kneading and stroking. You never seem to be at a loss for words, why do you need to show? I asked as I tried to slow my breath. My words came out choppy, as if I'd just finished sprinting up the stairs. Because I can't find the right words around you. Edward squeezed again before moving his thumb in slow tantalizing circles. I could tell you that I want to make love with you. But that falls short. I'd like to shag you senseless, but that leaves things out too. I could come up with a million different ways to tell you that I want you, and none of them old even come close to explaining how it is that I feel around you, or even worse, don't feel when you aren't with me. His words alone were enough to make my breath catch. But when combined with the way that he was touching me and the intensity of his gaze, there was no way that I could turn back. I didn't know what loomed ahead, but I was certain that the only way I could face it was with Edward. That alone was enough certainty to propel me forward. Pulling my arms back, I reached for the hem of my sweater, tugging it over my head. Once it was clear, I tossed it and my bra on the floor. That happened to the nervous little girl who was scared of her own shadow? Edward asked with an amused expression on his face. She grew up. Edward hummed as he pulled me into him. I'm curious to learn more. And learn we did. We explored, touched, and kissed as we peeled away clothing, all while discovering what actions might cause the most significant reactions. I pushed all of my insecurities to the back of my mind. And gave in to the moment. In doing so, I slowly came to realize the power I held. The confidence of knowing that we were at the same place emotionally, along with my own personal evolution, allowed me to view things through a different filter, to realize that I could provoke just as much as respond. That my insecurities had made me view everything as one-sided, when it was anything but. The hiss of reaction when I raked my nails down his back, or a whispered, "Fuck, Isabella," when I innocently sucked on the pad of his thumb reinforced how out of whack my perspective had been, how much I had missed. The fact that I could tempt him like he had me so many times made me curious, made me want to push. I was drunk on my newfound power, and I wanted to see what else I could do. Every reaction, a gasp of breath, hearing my name, or arms tightening around me fed my confidence. I became bolder in my exploration, not waiting for encouragement to touch or kiss. And as my hesitation fell away, Edward pushed me more, teasing me, trying to draw me further out. It was the most exquisite manner of torture, and I was torn between staying in this moment forever and begging for him to put me out of my misery. "You are playing with fire, you realize that, don't you?" I gasped as he blew a puff of cold air across my abdomen. "I like fire, so I guess I should keep playing." He ran his tongue along my hip bone, and then puffed out another little gust of air on the path he had just licked, raising gooseflesh and causing me to shudder. He just laughed. "You want fire," I broke off, not capable to form the rest of the sentence as he nipped at my hip bone. "Yes, I do." To reinforce his words, Edward shifted his body, effectively forcing my legs further apart. His free hand tracing up the outside of my thigh. "Although you aren't in much of a position to be dishing anything out now, are you?" I threw my arm out, pointing in the direction of the closet with a groan of resignation. "I can't handle this. Front pocket now." Edward chuckled and rested his chin on my hip, the slight stubble from his beard chafing against the sensitive skin. "Want some chewing gum?" "Fuck you, Edward. That sounds like a demand I might enjoy. Or should I make you say please first, Isabella?" The blood flooded my face. I hadn't meant for the jab to sound like it had come out. Edward knew that though, and laughed at my mortification as he lazily climbed off the bed and went to retrieve his bag. I lay back, eyes closed as I tried to collect myself before he came back. The bed shifted, and I rolled onto my side so that I could meet him as he crawled back in bed. "No questions this time, Edward." It was a statement for both of us. No doubts or fears for me. No need to make sure everything was okay for him. I swore to myself that if we got back here, I'd do everything right. He laced his fingers with mine and turned my hand to kiss the inside of my wrist. "I love you. I don't ever want you to doubt that." "I don't." I felt like I should be the one to initiate this, to set the tone for everything going forward. I didn't trust words. They were all too easily misconstrued. Actions spoke louder. "Tell me if I do this wrong, okay?" "I've never..." Well, I let my words trail off as I took the foil packet from his hand and tore it open, trying not to be self-conscious as I fumbled with the condom. Edward sucked in a long breath as I stumbled along, feeling awkward and clumsy and incredibly stupid. "My God, who would think that your innocence could be so damn sexy?" He rasped against my neck. It sent a small thrill through me. "I might be afraid of you when you realize how much power you have over me." I took a long breath, slipped my leg up over his hip. "I'm not innocent." "You absolutely are, and you're mine to corrupt." I like that idea immensely. Edward pulled me in closer, rolling onto his back and pulling me on top of him. We were both frozen in place. My heart felt like it was going to burst right out of my chest. "Look at me," Edward whispered, his hands finding my face and gently forcing my chin up. "Don't look away from me, Isabella." He dropped his hands from my face, placing them on my hips as he pulled us together. My breath caught, unnerved by how absolutely visceral everything felt. I couldn't look away if I tried. Just like our first time. The connection was as much emotional as it was physical. But there was less desperation in our motions this time. Neither of us was willing to let this end. Edward pushed me back, forcing me to sit up, following so that he could pull me in against his chest as we established a slow, tantalizing rhythm. I locked my arms around his neck, holding on for dear life as we moved together. "God, you feel good," Edward whispered, never looking away. "I'm not going to." I kept my arms locked around his shoulders, constantly matching his pace. His arms tightened around me, and he dropped his head to my shoulder, which muffled his voice as he gasped out my name. That same surge of power, knowing that I was the one that pushed him, that it was my name that he called out in release, was enough to push me over too. Gently pulling at his hair, I managed to clear enough space to kiss him, his tongue slipping in my mouth as I quickly followed his lead. It left us both winded and shaky. Edward moved to kiss my forehead, while pulling me closer into his chest. We sat that way for a long time, not moving or speaking. I was amazed by the power of something so simple. What we just did was no different than any other couple, age after age. Millions had taken the same path before us. For release, for love, for procreation, for money. 1,000,001 reasons existed to justify the act. But words are cheap. Better to leave them behind and trust what we felt, be it corporeal, intellectual, or emotional. We'd lain to rest the ghosts of lives past, and could finally live in the moment, as we legitimately deserved. More importantly, we had learned from our mistakes, and were now the wiser for it. We curled up together, limbs entwined, sheets wrapped around us as we talked. I told Edward about my paper. What I had left to do before going to Chicago to defend it. I told him about my friend Angela, who I would stay with while back in the States. I told him about Emmett and Rose, and the fight Rose and I had before I ran into Alice. Emmett is a good man. He deserves to be happy. I hate what Rose has done to him. But I love her, she's my best friend. He knows what he's doing, Bella. You can't protect him. Edward rubbed slow circles in my lower back, loosening up my muscles. He is a good man. He kept me sane, even when I deserved to be told to saw it off. What do you mean? He came to S.E.E. me not too long after everything happened. He wanted to understand what went on so that he could help you. At first I wanted to resent him for being there when I wasn't, but I was so desperate to find out how you were that I swallowed my pride and trusted him. I thought back to Rose's admission the night of our fight. And you spoke to Rose too. I could feel Edward's chest shake as he laughed. Yes, that was rather an experience. She cares for you a lot. I've never had a woman scare me before meeting her. But then she took pity on me, and made me realize that I was going to have to push you or you would fade back into yourself. She's actually the one who convinced me to pursue you, not to let you slip away. I cuddled in closer to his chest, taking in the enormity of his statement. I have to leave early in the morning. I don't want to, but there's something important that I have to do. When will you come back to London? The trip had been so impromptu, I hadn't considered how long I would stay. Suddenly, the allure of London was greater than anything that Whitby could offer. Originally, I thought I'd explore for a few days, but I do need to get back to work, and I should probably talk to Rose. Edward shifted underneath me so that we're eye to eye. Come home tomorrow. I don't want to go more than a few hours without seeing you. We are going to have to figure out a balance, you know. I still need to work. And so do you. I hated to think practically, but I wanted to do this right, to give us somewhere to work from. We will, I promise. But let's enjoy the rest of the time we have left here. He pulled me back against him, running his nose up my neck. I want to enjoy you over and over and over again. May I do that, Bella? A bit later, Edward slipped downstairs and grabbed some food. I'm not sure what he told Esme, but he wasn't gone long. We ate, we continued to talk, and we exhausted the stash in the front pocket of his bag. It was the perfect day. And we finally decided to give in to sleep. I lay in bed listening to his steady breathing. We'd managed to sort through things, and find a way to build a foundation. He still provoked me, infuriated me. But it was part and parcel to what we were. I closed my eyes as I replayed the day. The best part of it had been when made love for the first time. It wasn't the sex, it was at the end, when he called me Bella. I nuzzled my head into his chest and whispered, I love you, Edward. He was asleep, and wouldn't register my words, but there was time for that. I'd woken up around 10 a.m. to find myself alone. I knew that Edward had to be back in London for a meeting by noon, but a feeling of sadness settled in over me. So much to make up for, and yet so little time. I showered, dressed, and went downstairs to meet Esme for an early lunch. She peppered me with questions about yesterday's excursion, what I thought of Whitby, the ruins, 1,000,001 questions designed to draw me out. But in answering, I invariably drifted back to my time with Edward, and would find myself lost in thoughts that I didn't want to share. Earth to Bella, Esme called. You are 1,000,000 miles away. If I didn't know better, I'd think your brain and or your heart left in a black Aston Martin this morning. I smiled and looked down at my glass. Am I really that transparent? Only a little. I also remember how that whole, young love, thing feels. Esme paused as she took a sip of her iced tea. I never thought I'd see Edward like this though. I've only known him for a few years, but he's never been one to exude happiness. I saw him briefly before he left this morning. The conversation was very invasion of the body snatchers. I expect Alice to laugh, not him. I had to smile at her statement. There were so many different facets to Edward. Almost like there was a different flavor for each one of us. She pushed back from the table. Would you like some more tea? No, I'm good, thank you. I ran my finger around the rim of my glass, trying to collect my thoughts. Go back to London, Bella. I can tell that you are only half here. Whatever happened between when you showed up here and now is a good thing. Go with it. I glanced up to see her smiling at me, an expression of understanding on her face. Go home, Bella. I think he might be waiting for you. Home. That little nudge was all it took. I gave Esme a quick kiss on the cheek and bolted up the steps to my room. I tossed everything in my bag as quickly as I could, and then slipped across the hall for one last look around. My first observation on our suites had been that they better suited for a honeymoon or a weekend away, and had hoped to someday make it real. I took in the fireplace, the flowers on the mantel, and the rumpled bed sheets. I got my wish faster than I expected. I grabbed the vase and made my way back downstairs. Carlisle and Esme waited for me by the door, his arm draped around her shoulders. There was such a natural chemistry to them. It was apparent that they loved each other very much. I couldn't help but wonder if Edward and I could have a relationship like theirs someday. Over the course of the last 2 days I'd come to realize that I wanted that very much. Dropping my bag to the floor, I reached out to grasp Esme's hand. Thank you for everything. I came here to make the book that has been my life for years real. But I ended up with so much more. I can't tell you how grateful I am for everything. Carlisle smiled as Esme stepped forward to give me a quick hug. You'll always have a place here, Bella. And I do hope you'll send me a copy of your dissertation when it's done. It would be a wonderful addition to the local folklore section of the library. I laughed and hugged her back. I'll make sure you get a copy. It's probably not the most scintillating reading, but it's the least I can do. They stood in the doorway, watching as I made my way to the car. I tossed my bag in the trunk, and opened the driver's side door. Giving them one final wave before climbing in. A folded piece of paper caught my eye as I tried to stabilize the vase in the passenger seat. My name was written across the front in bold script, and a sprig of purple azalea peeked out from the crease. The stem of the azalea was ragged, as if torn off a bush. And I couldn't help but smile. I wonder if Edward had ever bought a flower in his life. He appeared to have zero compunction with raiding other people's gardens. It suited him though, heaven forbid he ever do anything the normal way. I let the car warm up while I unfolded the note. My hands shook a little bit, not from anxiety, but from anticipation. Bella, I didn't want to wake you, Lord knows that you need your rest, and I have to get back to London. I will be home later this evening and I will call you. You started talking in your sleep around 4. Something about daffodils and salad dressing. I wish I could crawl inside your head and understand what you were dreaming about. Was it as simple as a salad with flowers? Or was there some deeper, hidden meaning in your words? I find myself analyzing everything about you. What you do, what you say. And then in the midst of dissecting something profound about you, I find myself distracted by the way you run your hand through your hair, or how you twist the ring on your index finger. I can't seem to separate the need to know and understand everything about you with the need to touch you or feel you. It makes me wonder if I will ever be able to control the desire I have for you. It's all-consuming, and makes it difficult to think about anything else when I am around you. But at the same time, I revel in it. No one brings that out in me. Only you. But I take solace in the knowledge that I bring that out in you too. To see you flustered, distracted by something I do. You are so transparent sometimes, that it's all the more tempting to play with you simply to elicit a reaction. To make you blush or look away because you are embarrassed, or to push you knowing that you are too shy to ask. It's not about seeking your discomfort. It's knowing that you react the same way that I do. I don't know which awes me more. That you want me, or that you trust me to want you in return. I have not done much to earn that trust, and I will never take it for granted again. And so here I sit, watching you sleep. Wishing that I didn't have to go back to London. I'd rather be curled up around you in bed, listening to your breathing, reveling in your warmth. Wondering what strange and fantastic dreams we're running around in. That wonderful imagination of yours, and fighting the urge to kiss you until you wake up, so that I can make love to you yet again. You just smiled in your sleep. I wonder if you are dreaming, and if so, of what? I admit I hate to leave. Not simply leaving you, but leaving here, leaving the moment. I don't know what to expect when you return to London. I wish that I could hide you away in my flat for a few days. I want to talk to you, make you laugh. I want to be able to come up behind you at the kitchen counter and kiss your neck and feel your heartbeat accelerate because I'm close to you. I want more time where it is just us. Time is not our friend right now, and I'll do everything I can to control every minute if that means more time with you. But my meeting today is important. I've been unhappy in my work for a long time. I feel like a horrible human being to say that. What I do is important, but it's not fulfilling. When I first started in research, I think I did it out of a sense of guilt. A way to atone for not seeing, not being able to help. But thanks to you, I've come to realize that it was just another way to close myself off, and I can't do that any longer. You've inspired me to look inside myself and find the good. There is a spot open in pediatric oncology. They could use someone with my experience, and apparently my rather youthful appy. Rance is seen as a positive factor when dealing with children as patients. If they accept me, I'll be moving into rotation at St. Guy's. For the first time in my life I will be actively participating, practicing, helping. You give me the courage to do that. I sat back and watched for too long. It's time to go live, you are leading me there. So here I sit, on the brink of a new chapter in my life. All I can do is stare in wonder at you. You are tangled in the sheets, your arm thrown across the bed as if reaching for me. My wildest hope is that you are dreaming of me. I'd like to think that I invade your every thought. Regardless of if you are asleep or awake, it gives me more time to be with you. So sleep, my beautiful irrational Bella. Sleep and dream of me. Know that I wish I were here with you. My drive home will be filled with memories of you. And while you might expect that it will be dominated by our time in bed, first and foremost, it will be of you, asking for me to take you back. Know that I never let you go. I love you. I don't know how not to. While you might see me as a cynic, deep beneath lays the heart of an optimist. You own that part of me. Edward, dropping my head against the seat back. I closed my eyes and lost myself in his words. How much everything had changed in one short trip. I had been wrong about so many things, and yet here I was with another chance to try. A better chance because I wasn't letting my perceptions skew things. I was confident in my feelings for Edward. In his feelings for me. In what could be. I folded the note back into quarters and held it against my chest. He wasn't even in the same county and my heartbeat was accelerated. And yet I basked in it. I had been so afraid of the uncertainty, of not being able to catch my balance, that I had missed how much it brought out for me. In me. Dropping the note onto the seat next to the vase of flowers, I pulled my phone out of my coat pocket. Selecting the browser icon, I typed in, meaning azalea flower, and hit submit. When I read the results, I had to laugh. Azalea, fragile and ephemeral passion. Nothing Edward did was random, even picking a sprig of flowers to leave with a note. He knew what he was doing. The message he was sending. We were fragile, and our time here was fleeting. But it gave us something to grow from. I backed up to the main screen on my phone and tapped out a quick text. No way was the flower choice random. The reply was almost immediate. Why ever would you say that? I shook my head and laughed while typing out another quick message. Leaving for London, will call you when I get home. Knock 'em dead, Doc. I fastened my seatbelt and pulled out of the courtyard. London represented something to me now. When I'd first arrived in England, it had been a chance for redemption. A way to prove that I could accomplish what I set out to do. But now it was more. I had friends here. I had Edward, although putting any type of title to him felt odd. He was simply my Edward. Mine. I couldn't have wiped the grin off my face if I tried. An audiobook occupied me for a good part of the drive back. I allowed myself to get lost in characters and a ridiculous plow. T-line about the niece of the president being kidnapped. Not once did I think about my life, my dissertation, or what came next. Very simply, I enjoyed the drive and the inane plotline. I was about 15 minutes from the flat when my cell phone rang. Turning down the volume, I picked it up to see Emmett's name on the display. I'd missed him, and I sure as heck had a lot to tell him. Hey redneck, how are you? He groaned, but I could tell that he liked it. Please don't call me that. I am a well-educated man whose daddy didn't marry his cousin, thank you very much. I have the urge to make livestock jokes, but I'll behave. How are you? I'm okay. More importantly, how are you? Dare I say it, you sound good, maybe happy. I put my phone on hands-free so I could rest it in my lap and keep my hands on the steering wheel. I was still challenged to drive on the wrong side of the road, and I didn't want to risk anything. I am good, thank you for asking. This trip ended up being exactly what I needed. I am actually heading back to London now. Will I see you on the home front? Emmett pulled in a deep breath, and I could hear things rattling around on the other end of the line. You are coming back today. Shit, I am having dinner with Rose tonight at your place. She has finally cut loose the limey, we are going to actually sit down and talk about us. Don't reroute your plans on account of me, I can steer clear. My curiosity was piqued by the news that Rose had finally broken up with Royce, but I had a feeling that mine might not be the most welcomed call at the moment. Rose a tendency to get a bit defensive about ex-boyfriends, and given the terms on which we had last parted, I highly doubted that she would spill her guts willingly. No, that's okay, I can figure it out. I'm not going to force you out on your ear when you don't have anywhere else to go. I was sitting at a traffic light, when I saw a familiar black car pull into the intersection in front of me. You know what, Emmett? Totally not a problem, you go right ahead with your plans. Are you sure? What are you going to do? I have it all figured out. I'll fill you in later, I've gotta go. Good luck tonight. Emmett wished me a confused goodbye, and I quickly pulled up the number I had texted earlier. You aren't home already, are you? He didn't answer the phone with a hello. He knew who was calling. No, still in transit. Just wanted to call and see how things went. I stayed a few car lengths behind, hoping that he wouldn't recognize the car. Very well, actually. Just left the hospital, and am on my way home now. I think that I turned the charm on enough to have won them over. When do you ever not have the charm turned on, Doctor? Masson, I teased as I continued to follow him through London. The street we were on seemed familiar and I saw his turn signal go on before he pulled into the garage of his building. An 8-year-old almost did me in. I am going to have to brush up on my children's literature. Apparently I was uncool because I didn't know what a lemony snicket was. I laughed at his mock indignation. I could envision Edward sparring with a feisty 8-year-old. Is might be better for him than he realized. So what are you going to do tonight? I asked innocently as I maneuvered into an open spot down the street. Get out of this suit, first and foremost. And maybe wait for this lovely little American girl I know to get home. I was thinking I could lure her out and do all sorts of debauched things to her. The words sent a shiver through me. Focus, Bella, you are playing a part here. Well, I am going to pull off and grab something to drink. I'll give you a shout when I get to London, okay? I could hear him fumbling with his keys. He must be at his door. Drive safely, Bella. A couple had just entered the building, and I ran up the sidewalk, calling out a request to hold the door. The man gave it an extra push, and I caught it just before it latched closed. I hadn't paid much attention to the lobby on my hasty retreat weeks prior. An elevator bank was at one end of the room, with a door leading to the steps across from it. The couple I had followed in took the stairs, and I needed a minute to collect myself, so I hit the call button and waited for the elevator to descend. The building was older, and it took a ridiculous amount of time or the old brass cage to make its way from the first floor to the third. I took advantage of the time to shoot Rose a quick text message to let her know that I was back, and would see her tomorrow. By the time the doors opened, it felt like my heart was going to beat out of my chest. I stepped out into the hallway, and looked for the doorway to the stairs to get my bearings. We had come out and gone to the left last time. I turned right, mirroring my actions from the previous visit, and stopped short of a black lacquered door with the number 302 on it. My phone beeped just as I was about to knock. It was a text from Rose. Back in London, but will see me tomorrow. Yes you will, with details. Smiling, I shot back a quick reply telling her I expected the same thing, and then turned my phone off. Taking a deep breath, I knocked twice. On the other side of the door I heard motion, followed by Edward's voice. The door swung open as I heard him say, "Yes, I do owe you." He froze in the doorway. Charcoal gray flannel pinstriped suit, white shirt, and midnight blue tie loosened and hanging slightly askew. He stared at me for a long moment before breaking out in a wicked grin. "Alice, someone is here. I'll call you back later." The cell phone was tossed on the entryway table, and before I could register the motion, Edward had flipped me over his shoulder. I heard the door slam behind me. As Edward carried me into the living room. "Stopping for a drink, are we? Call me when you get to London, will you?" He dropped me on the couch, and stood over me, hands on hips. "When did you become a little sneak? What, like you are the only one that's allowed a surprise visit?" I sat up, and smiled at him innocently. He was happy to see me. Edward sat down on the edge of the coffee table, and reached out to skim his thumb across the edge of my lower lip. "I'm just surprised to see you is all. I'd already started working through intricate plots to get you here once you got home." "Edward, I'm a relatively modern girl. Hey, Bella, you have anything going on tonight?" Tends to work most of the time. "Oh really? It all seems rather anticlimactic, doesn't it?" I leaned forward so that my face was inches from his. No, it seems like cutting through the bullshit and saying what we think. Is that what it is? His hand slipped up into my hair, our eyes never breaking contact. Well then, how about this? Bella, would you like to come over? We can order some dinner, make out on the couch, and then go to bed and pick up where we left off early this morning. Oh, so that's how it goes, Feed me and get me into bed. I take it you have more of a stash than what was in your bag. We can go straight to bed if you'd prefer. I'll let you find out the rest. I crooked my finger at him, indicating that he should come closer. He leaned in a slight bit, a mischievous grin on his face. Closer please. He leaned in a little bit more. You are going to be difficult, aren't you? You're the one that's a modern girl. Why not be direct? That sounds like a dare, Edward. Fine, I dare you to ditch the tie and jacket and make out with me on the couch. I let my words trail off Edward impatiently pulled at the knot of his tie. After I get a drink. He stopped in mid-tug. The immaculate Windsor knot was undone, and the blue silk hung loosely from his collar. I reached out to grab hold of the wider end, and moving hand over hand, slowly pulled it free. I never broke eye contact. Have any Diet Coke? I asked, trying to appear innocent. The expression on Edward's face was absolutely priceless. And I realized that for the first time, I had managed to throw him off balance. I smiled and raised my eyebrows in curiosity. I was really enjoying the concept of equality. Payback is a bitch, Bella. He stood and held his hand out to me. Especially when you ask for a drink that requires ice. We made our way into an immaculate white and stainless steel kitchen, where Edward found something for me to drink. With ice of course. Most made it in the glass. Some went down my back. We spent the evening curled up on the couch, talking about his interview, how he felt about treating patients, and what it would mean for his work schedule. And of course, we'd break into intermittent makeout sessions, which weren't miserable either. All in all, it felt like a night that any normal couple would have. I am really glad I saw your car on the way home. It never would have crossed my mind to stop here. Really? Why is that? Edward angled his head back so he could see my face. We lay facing each other on the couch, his arm around my waist, my leg draped over his hip. I don't know, I guess I haven't allowed myself to title this yet. I pointed back and forth between the two of us, and without that, I guess I don't know what's presumptuous and what's not. Edward's arm tightened around me, pulling me in closer. Shouldn't we be past all that after the last 48 hours? But we aren't talking about the past anymore, remember? This is future tense. Lectured on sentence structure by an English major, is that what my life has been reduced to? I gave him a jab in the chest. Watch it, I'm going to be a doctor too, you know. Then I'll make you eat those words. Edward pushed my hair back from my shoulder, his gaze focused on the motion. I guess the answer to you. Our query ties directly to that, doesn't it? What do you mean? Your time in London is based solely on your dissertation. We've already discussed that you have to go back to the States to defend it. Hat kind of puts a natural bracket on us, doesn't it? A beginning and an end, so to speak. I hadn't allowed myself to think on his questions yesterday regarding my dissertation. I'd hoped for a bit more time to figure things out before having the conversation. What if I don't want it to be an end? What if I want it keep going? I was certain in my declaration, although I had no clue how to make it happen. There were still so many things in the air, of which only a few I had control of. Then what do you want, Bella? I've made it abundantly clear where I'm at. I need you to come clean too. I slipped my arm out from underneath his, and pushed the hair back that had fallen in his eyes. He always seemed so collected, so confident in his thoughts, in his needs. I envied his conviction in stating his thoughts. What do I want? I don't even know how to articulate it, Edward. I've always focused on getting my doctorate and teaching at some cool little college somewhere. But here it is late March, and the likelihood of me being done in time to find something in the fall is slim to none. I'll probably have to take some type of job on campus or in a library to make ends meet while I take some research papers to build credibility. That puts me at least a year out from finding a teaching position somewhere. I have more than enough money saved up to make it a 4 or 5 more months of not working, but then what? That's your education, Bella. I meant us. It is about us, Edward. I'll get my dissertation done, I'll have my doctorate, but then what? I need to find a job, which will determine where I live. You are taking a new position, which means you aren't likely to leave London, and I kind of have to go wherever there is a spot open. A year of no work is all I budgeted for. And I already put a steady dent in those funds. I have more than enough money, I can take care of. I cut him off before he could finish. No, I appreciate that, but no. Just no. I had to laugh at his idealism. 3 days ago we weren't really speaking, and now he was offering to take care of me. While gallant, it was also very 18th century. I've let too many people take care of me for too long. It's time I take care of myself. I am only being practical, Bella. We both want the same thing. It only makes sense. Let's agree to this, Edward. Call us whatever you want. Hell, call me whatever you want for that matter. There is nowhere else in the world that I would rather be than with you. We'll find a way to make this work. I promise. I am not ready to give up on us. And what about in the meantime? What are we? Quote, he spoke quietly, and I wasn't sure where he was headed with his questions. What do you want us to be? Edward stared directly into my eyes, bringing his hand up to trace the hollow at the base of my throat. I may need to play with some options. I swallowed in reaction. He knew exactly how to make the simplest statement sound indecent. Let's see, option 1 could be significant other. He continued to run his finger around the hollow of my throat, eyes never leaving my face. Too cliched. My answer was too fast. Edward smiled. He was right, I was transparent. At least when it came to him. Wouldn't want that now, would we? Very well then, option 2 could be object of my affection. His finger completed the circuit and slowly shifted lower, pushing open the placket of my shirt to trail down along the edge of my bra. Or we could go with option 3, beloved. He leaned in, his lips were on my shoulder, slowly kissing his way on the path he had just trailed with his finger. That's a bit of an awkward introduction at dinner parties. My retort was shaky, and Edward chuckled against my skin. Coherent thought was slowly slipping away, taking with it my ability to get out a decent response. What if I have a, for public consumption, title, something innocuous and boring like girlfriend? Then I can call you something different when we are alone. Like what? Honey, darlin'. I over-enunciated on the darlin', mimicking Edward's greeting the first day I met him. He lifted his head to look directly into my eyes. That or maybe something more appropriate. I was thinking more along the lines of lover, although I am rather partial to mine, even if that's not a proper title. Then again, I know that no one else will be calling you that. At least not if I have my say about it. I could feel the blood rush to my face. Edward sat up on the couch and swung his legs around to stand up. Come on, it's not that late, but so. How I think I would rather continue this conversation in my room. Preferably sans clothes. He pulled me up off the couch, and reached over to flip off the end table light. I couldn't help but notice the cluster of photos on the table. Alice and Jasper. A photo of Alice and Edward with an older couple, who I assumed were his parents. Edward and Carlisle standing on a ski slope somewhere, poles resting against their shoulders. And one empty wood frame. It still held the manufacturer's fake artwork behind glass. That's yours. I picked it up at the hospital gift shop today. Seemed like place to start. I just need something to put in it, you know. Edward was watching me intently. What do you mean, it's mine? You are a smart girl, Bella, figure it out. Now come on. He grabbed my hand, and pulled me along behind him towards the bedroom. And I followed willingly, realizing that when I woke up to get water or food in the middle of the night, it would be my picture frame that was knocked off the table. Mine. Whether it was a description of me or my place in his life, I didn't care. So long as I had it. That's all I wanted. Once back in London, we quickly fell into a comfortable groove. My days were spent at the library. My nights, assuming he wasn't working, were with Edward. I could say that we fell into pattern of an established couple. But it would be a lie. While we did normal, couple-like, things, the intensity, the need only grew. We couldn't exist in the same room without touching. And touching always devolved into something else. It's a miracle that we ever left Edward's flat. And when we did, it's even more impressive that we didn't get arrested for indecency. It wasn't just him, although he did have a penchant for pulling me into dark or secluded corners. I fueled the fire too, albeit in a more provocative way. One evening when we were out to dinner, I decided to try the whole, foot in the lap, bit a la Flashdance. Needless to say, dessert was not consumed at the restaurant that night. If anything, the connection between us became stronger. The lines blurred to the point that there was no before, simply now. Everything about Edward consumed me, and it took all that I had not to get pulled under, not to lose myself in the tempest. There were moments when everything about him scared me to no end. Yet through it, there were things that I began to realize about myself which made the fear and uncertainty all worthwhile. I was finally living outside of my comfort zone, believing in what I could be. I couldn't have gotten there on my own. Edward pushed my buttons, argued with me, taunted me to no end. But then he would compliment me, encourage me, listen to my thoughts like no one else had ever done. He helped me learn how to really stand up for myself, to have confidence in who I could be and in what I thought. He had no compunction calling bullshit or asking why when no one else ever had. It was intimidating at first, but once I understood what and why he was doing, I began to thrive in it and what it brought out in me. I feel like I am talking to a 3-year-old. Every other word out of you is why. I ranted one Saturday morning. Edward D. had just finished reading the full draft of my dissertation, and was peppering me with questions about the contrast between Lucy, Mina and the weird sisters. He refused to let me go until I could justify my position. You are letting emotion cloud your thoughts. Be objective. There is a difference in their actions, and humanity is not enough of a justification. If you can't defend it to me, how are you ever going to defend it to someone you don't know? Because defending it to someone I don't know will be easier. I shot back, frustrated. You ask me questions and then stare at me while I try to answer, and I can't think. That is the kind of pressure you'll be under, so it's good that you can't think. You need to learn to control your emotions. Everything is too close to the surface, and it takes over. You need to rein it in. I threw a pillow at him in frustration. How do I rein it in? Somehow I didn't think my dissertation committee will be looking at me like they want to throw me down and screw me 6 ways to Sunday. Fine. I stood, pulling in a breath before wandering aimlessly around the room. It's different because Mina's and Lucy's actions were driven by love. Romantic, physical, fraternal. It doesn't matter. Whereas the weird sisters were driven solely by thirst. Yes, the common bond is lust, sexual attraction, but that is the only link between the two. The intent for Lucy and Mina was good. And intent is what counts. I stopped my pacing to look up at Edward, my eyes wide in mortification at my answer. He was smiling at me as if I'd just told him that E equals MC2. Now that really wasn't that difficult. Was it? I couldn't help but smile back. I felt like a little kid receiving praise for answering a question correctly. No, but you did have to goad me. I didn't goad you. I just pushed you a little. You know this stuff, Bella. Have faith in yourself. Have faith. It was easier said than done. Flopping down on the couch next to him, I sighed dramatically. Next thing you'll tell me to picture them all naked. No, the only person I want you picturing naked is me, and I'd rather have the real thing. He grabbed me around the waist, pulling me onto his lap. So should I reward you for your breakthrough? A bit of Pavlovian reinforcement. I don't want reinforcement, thank you. My hands were resting on his chest, and I could feel the steady rhythm of his heart. It had become my anchor. My calming point when I felt ruffled. My hand on his chest and that easy constant beat always calmed me down. I'd be perfectly happy if you took me to bed and fucked me senseless. For an English major, your language is absolutely atrocious, you know that. Edward wisecracked as he leaned back into the couch. I was making a point for dramatics. I shot back, confused. I'd expected my feeble attempt at talking dirty to spur him on, not push him away. Is that what it was? What if I don't want to fuck you senseless, to use your parlance? Your loss, I retorted, trying to stand up. Edward sighed and tightened his arms around my waist. Bella, I am not trying to antagonize you. I am making a point. Don't think this is only about sex. I want more from you than that. He was right. It was easy to let the physical aspect of our attraction take over, drive our interactions. There was more to us than that. It was just all wrapped up in a complex, infuriating bundle that interconnected. Sometimes it was hard to separate lust from love, affection and attention. I'm sorry. I looked down at my lap, embarrassed. This is just all so new to me. I don't know how to balance what my brain and body are telling me, and for some reason my body tends to shout the loudest around you, I admitted sheepishly. Damn hormones, he teased and kissed me on the forehead. I'm just as guilty. It's easy to get swept away in it all. And unfortunately, Edward glanced down at his watch. Getting swept away would make you late. You promised Rose that you would be there by noon. So you'd better get a move on. Groaning, I pushed up off the couch and straightened my t-shirt. I know. I'm going. We'll see you at 2. Edward smacked my butt as I leaned down to grab my backpack. You aren't helping, Edward, I chided. Sorry, it was there, how could I resist? He gave me a wide-eyed innocent look. I knew better. Why don't you leave your backpack here? You'll be back later tonight. Save your spine and all that rubbish. You are a hematologist, not a chiropractor. Drive. Masson, I mocked him. Just remember, you promised that you'd give Emmett a rundown on the rules, okay? No torturing the Yank, no matter how much you like to wind him up. Edward sighed dramatically and held his hands up in resignation. Fine, I'll help him out, but once we start playing, he's on his own. Blowing Edward a kiss, I made my way down to the street to hail a cab. Rose was going to pick up food and meet me at the flat by noon to start packing up. We'd promise Emmett we would meet him at the park at 2 with the trappings of an all-American picnic. Fried chicken, potato salad, deviled eggs, the works. Emmett insisted if he was going to play a pansy-ass game, like rugby, he sure as hell was going to do it his own way. The entire concept of Emmett playing rugby came on a dare from a British colleague who had gotten tired of Emmett talking about American football. He'd dared Emmett to give rugby a try, telling him that real men play a sport that doesn't require protective gear. Edward had volunteered to back him up and to give him a crash course in the rules. But I knew Edward well enough to expect that there would be laughs at Emmett's expense. We'd spent a lot of time with Emmett since returning from Whitby. He and Edward had actually become fast friends, and bonded in a way that only men can. A stranger would wonder if they hadn't been friends for years the way they joked around. It was nice to see the two men that I loved, albeit in different ways, find a common ground to work from. I could see through the bluster and bravado that Emmett put up easily, and I could tell that he was lonely. He'd mentioned staying on in London indefinitely. If that were to happen, he needed to build a friend base that would be around in 5 or 6 months. Speaking of Rose, we'd had a good heart-to-heart when I got back to London, both of us conciliatory to our behavior, but agreeing that the base intent was genuine. As much as it had hurt, there was honesty in both our words that night. It was painful to hear, but we had both learned and adjusted our actions out of it. Rose's first step had been a phone conversation with Royce while I was in Whitby, telling him that she didn't want a romantic involvement. That didn't end the phone calls or flower deliveries, but to me, it was a step in the right direction. And just like he had mentioned when we spoke in the car that day, Rose and Emmett sat down to talk about the state of their relationship. Not only what had transpired, but where it was going. I had desperately wanted to ask how it went, and what was decided, but I knew it was inappropriate to pry when I was so close to both of them. Deep down, I knew that there was something more than just a physical attraction between them, but I also knew that my dabbling would only make things worse. So I did the only thing I could do. Offered shoulders to both of them, and made sure I was out of the flat as much as possible. The less I was around, the more opportunity they would had to convert whatever had been before into something longer lasting. There were times when I felt guilty about not spending more time with Rose, but that was invariably tempered by the realization that her project would be up in another month and a half, sending us both back to the States. I had done some digging into the cost of potentially staying in London, although the cost of living was astronomical, especially given the fact that I had minimal to no job prospects over here. At one point, I toyed with asking Jasper for help, but knew that an institution like King's wouldn't touch a freshly minted doctoral candidate with a 10-foot pole. The ability to stay and make ends meet while working in a bookstore or the desk at library is laughable, and as much as I realized that this is where I wanted to be, I couldn't accept Edward's offer to cover my expenses. I needed to be able to truly stand on my own before I could ever think about depending on someone else, simply for the knowledge that I could do it if necessary. I owed that to myself. My reverie was broken when the cabbie announced that we had arrived. I paid him, and was climbing out of the car as I saw Rose coming up the street, arms loaded down with. I held out a hand to take one from her. "What did you buy?" I asked as I peeked over the edge. "All kinds of junk food." I ran out of time, so I grabbed a bunch of finger food. "What happened to fried chicken?" When I spoke to Rose yesterday morning, she'd told me about her grand plans to make everything from scratch in exchange for me providing homemade potato salad and deviled eggs. Royce showed up unannounced, she answered quietly, not meeting my gaze. I had to deal with that. I followed Rose up the stairs, waiting for her to continue. Whatever had happened, it obviously wasn't good. "Look, I am not going to beat around the bush, Bella. Because this could affect you too." He was drunk, and he was pissed off. He was going on and on about how he wanted me back, that he loved me. I tried to be diplomatic and convince him to leave. But then he tried to force his way in. I managed to get the door closed and bolted and hoped that he would get the clue, but it totally set him off. He started pounding on the door demanding that I let him in. I couldn't do it though, something just felt off about it. That's when he started kicking and banging on the door, like he was trying to knock it down. We cleared the Saint step and turned towards our flat. I gasped. The door looked as though it had been attacked with a hammer or something. Chunks of wood were gouged out of the door in millwork. There were also a few large dents in the plaster around the frame, as if it had been caught in the crossfire as well. Jesus rose. I stepped forward to run my hand across a dent in the wall. I called the police, and they ran him off. But she broke off, voice shaking. Why didn't you call me? I would have come home. I left. I didn't think it was wise for either of us to be here. Unable to tear my gaze away from the door, I processed her words. Horrified at what could have happened. Where did you go? She still wouldn't look me in the eye. Emmett's. What did you tell him? Rose unlocked the door and pushed it open. That there was a drunk guy causing problems in the building, and that I was too spooked to be there alone. You didn't tell him the truth. I wasn't an attack, simply an observation. No, I censored, but I didn't lie. He would have gone off half-cocked and done who knows what. I didn't want him to do anything stupid. Royce's family has some serious clout, and I don't want to think what they could do to Emmett. Looking around the apartment, I turned over her comments in my mind. Something didn't make sense. She was too calm and collected about the whole thing. She'd thought this through way too well. Rose, this isn't the first time he's gotten out of hand, is it? She set the paper bag on the kitchen counter, and leaned back with her arms crossed over her chest. I'd never seen her look as tired or defeated as she did standing in our tiny little kitchen, the weight of the world on her shoulders. He pushed it verbally a few times, but he had always been drinking. The only time it ever came close to physical was that night that Emmett was here, and we got into it. What did he do, Rose? Running her hands through her hair, Rose closed her eyes and took a long breath. He wanted to come in. To have sex with me. Well, actually, his euphemisms weren't so polite. I told him he had too much to drink and to leave me alone. He didn't like that, and decided to try and give things a go in the hallway. He was taunting me, calling me a tease for holding out on him, that sort of thing. So the slam against the door was. I needed her to say it, to be honest. The slam against the door was me. My hands immediately flew to my mouth, stifling a gasp. It was a stupid reaction, but I couldn't help it. He was totally conciliatory after, and I chalked it up to him not being able to hold his alcohol. But the more I saw him, the more I realized that he wasn't the nice guy the first thought he was. I guess I got caught up in the romance of who he was enough to discount his actions. It's stupid, and I made my own bed, but I've dealt with it now. She pushed off the counter, and started moving around the kitchen, focusing on moving bottles of beer from the refrigerator to a soft-sided cooler. It's all over now, Bella. I was stupid, and should have broken it off a long time ago, but I didn't. But it's taken care of now, and he's not going to bug me anymore. The Ollie's coming here last night pretty much assured that. Now come on, we have stuff to pack. Rose made a valiant attempt to lighten the mood and shift both our thoughts away from Royce King and our battered front door. She told stories about work and hinted at the fact that she'd be approached about extending her stay, even opening up about Emmett a bit. I could tell that it was hard for her, but if she didn't want to talk about it, then I would have to let it be. Once we got to the park I'd figure out a way to get Edward alone and fill him in as to what had happened. He'd know what to do about protective orders in England, as well as what the police could do to help keep Rose safe. I never thought I would say it, but the thought of calling Mike actually crossed my mind. He would have known what to in a situation like this. But calling would have been wrong on my part. By 1:45 we'd packed up food, blankets, and umbrellas, and loaded everything into a cab, which dropped us off in front of a small local park. We easily located the game, already in progress, following the laughter and raucous singing. Two large knots of men dressed in all states of athletic apparel dominated the field. The sidelines were full of women and children, socializing, playing, or just enjoying the game. It was easy to pick Emmett out. The bright blue and white of his Tennessee Titans football jersey stood out like a neon sign against the muted neutrals and dark colors of the other players. He waved hello, grinning and tugging on the front of his jersey with a thumbs up. Rose shook her head, mumbling "oh"mething under her breath about large children before waving back. She could grumble and grouse all she wanted. There was no denying the smile that lit up her face when she saw Emmett. We spread out tea. He blankets as Rose pulled beers from a soft-sided cooler. I grabbed the bag of popcorn we had popped at home. We probably looked like idiots, but we'd promised Emmett an all-American throwdown, and we were going to give it to him. About 15 minutes into play, a steady drizzle started to fall. We pulled up the blankets, and took refuge under our umbrellas with our beers. Emmett was clearly struggling to pick up the rules of the game, but his athleticism and enthusiasm gave him a natural advantage. He stopped the opposing team from advancing the ball a few times, although his touch was a little overzealous, resulting in at least a few bodies on the ground. Everyone seemed to be good-natured about it, and took to taunting Emmett about rugby being a gentleman's sport. I didn't know much about the game, but even I knew that wasn't true. He and Edward made a good pair, blocking as Edward dodged and weaved around the opposing team. I was surprised at how fast he was. I'd never thought about him in relation to sports, yet seeing him playing rugby, it seemed like the most natural thing in the world. We stayed huddled under the umbrellas, drinking beer and catcalling from the sideline as Emmett missed tagging an opponent. The grass was wet enough to make traction difficult, and he ended up flat on his ass, howling with laughter. "You know, there is one good thing to this," Rose observed as she took a sip from a bottle of beer. "What would that be?" I asked, pulling my blanket closer in around me to close out the chill in the air. Instead of answering, Rose inclined the neck of her bottle towards the field. Edward's hand was extended, pulling Emmett to his feet. They stood side by side, Edward gesturing as if explaining something. The rain had soaked his hair, making it appear almost black, and he pushed it back from his eyes with a careless gesture. Emmett's baseball hat was on backward, and the crown was dark from the moisture. Both of their legs and shorts were streaked in mud and grass. "I'm not kinky type of girl at all, but if that visual doesn't make you consider a threesome, nothing will," Rose stated innocently. "Hey, get your dirty mind off my boyfriend." I watched Emmett throw his head back in laughter, pushing Edward's shoulder in jest. Edward pushed him back, a wicked grin on his face. "On second thought, you can have all the naughty fantasies you want. Just be quiet while I stare and drool." We watched them walk back to the huddle, joking and playing around like two teenage boys. How many flag football games did we go to in college? I sure as hell don't remember them ever looking like that. She stared longingly at Emmett, who pulled his jersey up to wipe the water away from his face. "Damn, look at that stomach. I could lick the water right off of him. I don't want or need to hear what you'd like to do to him, thank you very much." I teased Rose as I watched Edward flick the ball around carelessly. I watched his hands in fascination, amazed at how effortless he made it look. He paused, looking up to flash me an absolutely devilish grin. He busted me staring, and he wasn't going to let me live it down. But it was okay, I knew that smile. And I knew the thoughts that typically accompanied it. This game needed to be over, soon. Rose wasn't the only one who was getting worked up by the rampant display of bravado and testosterone. "He's got it just as bad as you do. You two are borderline sickening," Rose observed as she glanced at me, a self-satisfied smile highlighting her amusement. "Stop it," I protested, ooking away to hide my embarrassment at being caught. Fortunately, play resumed, and with it, the banter and teasing as Emmett continued to try and pick up the concept of rugby. After each dead play, Edward would walk him through what happened and why. They'd stand close together, Edward's arm thrown over Emmett's shoulders as he explained why something happened or how Emmett should have handled the situation. While I'd never admit it to her, Rose was right. Watching the two of them standing together did give a girl ideas, and I felt the blood rush to my face in embarrassment for even considering it. They played for another hour, getting progressively muddier as the rain continued to fall. By the time the game was called, both Emmett and Edward were soaking wet, their clothes streaked with mud and grass stains. "Rosie, baby, come give me a big ol' smooch," Emmett called as he sauntered over, arms held wide and a goofy smile on his face. "No way, you are a disgusting mess." Rose held her hands up to block him, but I noticed that she also didn't push back when he pulled her into a hug and nuzzled into her neck. "Aw, come on, don't be that way," Emmett pleaded innocently. "I think I am going to be sick," I teased, looking away. Secretly I was ecstatic. It was the closest I'd seen to any real affection between them, and I couldn't help but silently sigh in relief. "What? Emmett gets a kiss and I don't?" Edward's voice was quiet in my ear. He stepped in behind me, close enough to whisper without touching. "I didn't realize you wanted one." "Oh, there are a number of things that I want, Isabella. But none of them appropriate in front of all these people." Stop it. You are not going to get me all wound up here. Edward chuckled and planted a kiss on my cheek. Fine, I'll just take you home then. You can help me get cleaned up. I seem to have mud in some inopportune places. You're not taking her anywhere, bub. Rose called out. You two are going to go get cleaned up and buy us a few pints for standing out here in the rain. It's the least you can do. I don't know, Rose. I kind of like the mud. I looked up at Edward through my eyelashes. I didn't want to go drinking, I wanted to go home. Now, with him, no way. We are going to go out and have a good time. Simple as that, Rose protested. She was busy folding up blankets and stuffing them back in the bag. Emmett sat on the ground next to her, taking a pull off the beer she had given him. Come on, Bella, it will be fun. We'll toss back a few, then you two can go back to Edward's and do all that kinky shit we know you repressed types like to do. He does have a point, you know, Edward teased quietly. You do come off a bit repressed. I jabbed Edward in the ribs in mock consternation. He laughed and pulled me into an embrace. A quick kiss on the cheek, his conciliatory gesture. And if I recall, you do get rather feisty when you drink, so maybe we should go after all, Edward whispered in my ear. I could end up having some fun with this. Emmett stood up, clapping his shoes together to shake off the mud. We'll meet you at the usual spot in an hour, okay? Should give me more than enough time to get cleaned up. He knotted the shoes and draped them over the strap of the bag. Edward, you can shower at my place so you don't have to schlep home. Edward cocked an eyebrow at Emmett with a dubious look. Schlep, what the bloody hell is that? We parted ways at the entry to the park, with the promise to meet at our pub in an hour. The mood was light on the ride home, and was only slightly dampened when I took in our mauled front door. I had forgotten to mention the whole Royce situation to Edward. I simply couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't seen the last of him. But Royce King didn't deserve my thoughts tonight. I wanted to go out and have a good time with my friends, not waste my time on him. Emmett's going to see the door when he comes over, you know, I reminded Rose as I headed for my bedroom. I am hoping that they'll have it fixed before then, she called back. You can't hide this from him. Nor should you. Emmett has a right to know. He'd want to help. Maybe I don't want him to help. Rose stood in my doorway, a brush in her hand. It was bad enough that I dated them both at the same time. He doesn't need Royce thrown in his face again. Nor does he need to protect me. I am a big girl, Bella. I hope you know what you are doing, Rose. I appreciate you wanting to protect Emmett, but he deserves to know. Since we were going to the pub, there was no need to change clothes. Hair and teeth were brushed, makeup touched up, and we were ready to go. You two looked cozy today. Dare I say it, is there a thaw in the nuclear winter? I teased as I opened our door. Maybe, although it takes an awful lot of heat to thaw things out. Somehow, Ms. Hale, I don't think you will have any issue generating heat with the redneck, I shot back. I loved being able to tease her again. I could tell by the look on her face that she felt it too. I stepped forward into the hallway as Rose pulled the door shut to lock it. Oh, we've never had a problem with heat. It's logic that kills me every time I'm around him, and I just want clothes to be gone. Well, isn't that just bloody lovely? You are quite the little tramp, aren't you, Rosalie? A cultured voice rang out from the top of the steps. Royce stood there, fists balled, face a livid red. He took a step forward, his eyes never leaving Rose. Tarting around with a new chap, are we? I should have expected as much from you. Something was off. It was apparent that he was angry, but his words were delivered in a cold, clipped fashion. He sounded almost robotic. Go call the police, Rose. The words were out of my mouth before I could think. No, Rosalie, don't you dare. You and I have things to discuss. My mind was racing, and all I could think of were the gouges in the door. If he did that to try and get at Rose, what would happen if he finally caught her? Anger sparked a course of adrenaline through me, and I stepped forward without thinking. You have no business here after last night. You need to leave now. My tone was cold, and I hoped, authoritative. But Royce just laughed. Or what, you'll ring the constable? I think not. Not like they would listen to either of you little sluts anyway. No, run along so that Rosalie and I can talk. His words infuriated me. His arrogance, the entitlement. I pulled myself up as tall as I could, hands on my hips. Leave, now. Bella, it's not, Rose called out from behind me. But it was too late. Royce's arm swung once, his palm catching me across my cheek, rocking my head back. My mouth filled with warm liquid that tasted of copper and salt. His second circuit was with a closed fist, not an open palm. It knocked me off balance, sending me stumbling backwards. I vaguely registered Rose calling my name as I stepped back, trying to catch my balance. A sharp pain exploded in my head along with a bright light. Then everything went dark. The first thought I registered was that my tongue felt like it had been coated in wallpaper glue. My mouth opened, and my lips were just as dry. It was like I'd run a marathon. My body ached, my brain was cloudy, and I would have happily sold my soul for a drink of water. It was difficult to open my eyes. They felt so heavy, and then when I could finally crack them open, the light streaming made my head scream in pain. Too bright, I whispered to myself. Hey, shush, it's okay, I'm here. Edward's voice cut through the fog. I could feel his hand on my face. I smiled, closed my eyes, and drifted back off to sleep. The next time I opened my eyes, the room was dark. My nose itched, but when I tried to move my arm, it was heavy. Something like a clamp covered my index finger, and an IV line ran into my arm. I tried to lift my head to look around, but I was so tired, it was almost impossible to move. Giving up, I slowly leaned my head towards the small bit of light that filtered in. It came from a large window that I didn't recognize, the blinds pulled open to let in the moonlight. My eyes slowly made a circuit around the room, taking in the antiseptic environments of what must be a hospital. A television hung on an arm from the wall. Monitors to my left, an IV stand and bag next to them. Slowly shifting my head to the other side, I registered a chair pulled close enough for the occupant to rest his head on my bed. The mess of red hair pressed up against my leg, as if instilling comfort or support. Edward's eyes were closed, his mouth slightly open as he slept. A small furrow dented in between his eyebrows, the faint light deepening the dark circles under his eyes. He looked horrible and wonderful at the same time. I wanted to wake him up, to ask why I was here, what had happened, but my mouth was too dry to talk. I slipped my arm down my leg to rest the edge of my hand against his head. Then I closed my eyes, dropping back off into the sleep that was claiming me. When my eyes opened again, the room was lighter, although not as painful as the first time. Edward sat in the same chair I had noticed earlier. His feet were propped on my bed as he read from a folder. He was dressed for work in a blue shirt and tie. The dark circles were still there, although not quite as pronounced. "Hi," I rasped. His head shot up, a look of relief flitting across his face. "Hey, Sleeping Beauty." He stood, moving to the edge of my bed. "How are you feeling?" "Dry," was all I could manage to get out. Edward grabbed a plastic glass off the table next to my bed, and shook what sounded like ice out of a blue plastic pitcher. Turning back to the bed, he slipped his hand under my shoulders to elevate me slightly. "Just take one, and let it melt, okay?" He tipped the glass against my lips, and I opened my mouth to catch a disc of ice. The cold was startling at first, but once it started to melt it felt heavenly. "Better?" he inquired as he sat down on the edge of my bed and took my hand. I nodded, not wanting to speak for fear of choking on the ice cube. The motion set off alarms everywhere. My head and muscles both screaming in protest. "Do you know where you are?" Edward asked. I noticed that his hand had shifted to my wrist, and he was looking over my shoulder at something. I shook my head no gently. The motion wasn't as painful as the up and down of a yes, but it still hurt. "Pain is a good sign, but try not to move. You are at St. Guy's. You've been here for a week." He held the glass up. "Are you ready for some more ice?" "Yes." A whisper was all I could get out, but it hurt infinitely less than a nod. Edward slipped his arm behind me, and easing me up again, held the glass tea. Oh, my lips so that I could catch another disc. He eased me back gently before kissing my forehead and smoothing my hair away from my face. "I'm going to go get your doctor. Try to stay awake for him, okay? He'll want to check you out and ask you some questions, and I need you to stay conscious for them." I let out a shaky breath, and slowly nodded, feeling a bit less woozy. Edward stared at me for a long moment, an expression on his face that I couldn't understand. Then he smiled and leaned his forehead against mine. "God, I missed you," he whispered before straightening up. He ran the back of his hand across my cheek. "Be right back." "Okay." I couldn't tell if it was a question to me or an affirmation to him. I moved my head up and down once to indicate that I understood, wincing in pain once he was out of sight. With Edward out of the room, I was able to take in my surroundings better. Small speakers sat on the table next to my bed, along with a few books and a picture of my dad. The table in the corner held vases of roses, daffodils and tulips. My backpack sat in a chair against the far wall. I tried to shift in the bed, and felt something roll off my lap. Reaching down next to my leg, I found a familiar lumpy object. Your doctor will be by in a few minutes. Edward stood in the doorway, his hands stuffed in his pockets. Who brought Bubba? My voice sounded hoarse, like I had a cold or bronchitis. Edward sighed and ran his hand through his hair before making his way across the room to sit down in the chair. He took the stuffed dog from my hand. So that's what his name is. Rose brought it a few nights ago. I smiled and closed my eyes. My father had bought him for me when I was little. My dad. I talked to your dad, he sounds like a nice man. Not the introduction I would have liked to have had. But it's one more thing that I can cross off my Bella Swan mystery list. I was too tired to ask him why he called my dad, so I let it go. I just smiled and turned my hand over, slowly curling my fingers in as a non-verbal request for contact. He slipped his hand underneath, lifting it up so he could kiss the inside of my palm. He's been incredibly worried about you. But Rose and I have been keeping him updated. He's not a man of many words, is he? We were interrupted by my doctor, who shooed Edward away while he checked my pulse, eye responsiveness and asked me some basic questions. He also gave me a rundown of my injuries. I was admitted with a cerebral contusion from a fall down the steps. The swelling had put too much pressure on my brain, therefore the decision had been made to keep me in an induced coming as a way to circumvent the risk of serious brain damage. I'd been out for 6 days while medication had been used to slow my circulation and decrease the swelling. Beyond the head injury, I had 6 stitches in my forehead, just above my right temple and another 12 stitches in my right forearm. I also had scrapes and bruises all over my body, and a badly sprained left ankle. It was surreal, listening to him rattle of injury after injury. I didn't remember a single thing. The closest thing I could compare it to would be blacking out after drinking too much. And waking up in a strange place. All in all, the doctor appeared to be happy with my responses, and indicated that he wanted to run some additional tests before making a further assessment. Aside from the blow to the head, I had been pretty damn lucky, he informed me. They would run tests, including a full scan to assess how my brain was healing. He also warned of side effects to a head injury, such as memory loss, radical swings in emotion, and potential for some fine motor impairment. He could tell from my reaction that I wasn't processing it all, and promised to answer questions throughout testing. It was all so incredibly overwhelming. The minute the doctor was gone, Edward was back in my room. How are you feeling? He asked. His hand went immediately to my wrist. His eyes to what I would assume to be a clock and the wall. Tired, I whispered as I tried to pull my wrist back. I'd already gone through one circuit of poking and prodding, and didn't want any more. Edward gave me a sheepish smile and let go of my wrist. Sorry, learned habit. Sick, doc. I gave a weak smile and let my eyes fall shut again. Just need a cuddle. Somehow I don't think the Medical board recognizes that as a sanctioned treatment. Edward teased me. It was a relief to hear him more relaxed. Holistic, I replied, too tired to say anything more. I felt his arm slip under me again, gently sliding me over before climbing into the bed. Resting on his side, Edward bent his arm to support his head. His other hand slipped underneath mine to rest on my stomach. I squeezed it, too tired to talk anymore, but unwilling to fall asleep yet. Do you want to hear it all? Edward asked tentatively. I squeezed his hand once, hoping he would understand it as a yes. What is the last thing you remember? It was hard to pull cogent thoughts together. I'd have a flash of something, and then it would be gone. I focused for a few minutes, trying to remember. You were muddy. Edward focused on our hands, not meeting my gaze. You fell down a flight of steps after trying to protect Rose from Royce King. Now that I am over being worried sick about you, I am torn between yelling at you for being stupid enough to go head to head with someone twice your size or loving you even more for being so brave. Maybe it should be a little bit of both. I tried to recall an interaction with Royce, but nothing was there. Rosé, I whispered, unable to raise my voice any higher. She's fine. She was knocked around a bit, and is staying with Emmett until her new flat is available. He didn't think it was safe to stay in the current one. My brain was too foggy to process it all. I had vague flashes of our building, of Rose shouting, and memories that I shouldn't have. Rose crying and saying over and over that she's sorry. Someone with a British accent talking about Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Dirty jokes about Vickers. What are you smiling about? Edward asked. I could feel his breath on me cheek. It felt good to have him close. I was tired, and I was sore, but I felt safe. Dirty jokes. I heard him chuckle. You remember those, Guess it's a good thing I didn't tell you anything incriminating. Could have gotten kind of dodgy, couldn't it? Tell me, I whispered. Tell you something dirty. I think your voice is sexy like that, Edward teased. Incriminating. Tell me. It was difficult to get out more than a few words, but I managed to make my point. Okay. He was quiet for a minute before answering. I moved all of your things to my flat. Go home, I asked. I was struggling to stay awake. But I needed answers. You, me, I guess I can answer both. They'll keep you for a few more days. My professional hypothesis is that they'll want to do another scan to assess the healing process. If that comes through okay, they'll monitor you for a few days to gauge your progress. I would think they would release you by the end of the week. You'll stay with me so that I can keep an eye on you until you're back up and around. Then we can talk about what comes next. As for me, I pop in throughout the day, and then stick around at night until they kick me out. A few of THE nurses have taken pity on me when I've fallen asleep in here, but for the most part, I've been here as much as I can. I squeezed Edward's hand in acknowledgement. I was too tired to talk anymore. Get some rest, Bella. I'll be here when you wake up. I promise. It was the last thing I remember him saying before drifting off into sleep. The next morning brought a flurry of activity, including a full scan to verify that all the swelling was down and that injury site was recovering as expected. Edward stayed with me through as much of it as possible, insisting that I must be okay, because I act a joke about my brain already being scrambled when the doctor came in. I was slowly regaining my strength and voice, and was more aware of what was going on around me. I was still unable to recall of the events leading up to my hospitalization, and peppered Edward with questions. He gave short, terse answers regarding Rose and Royce, and guaranteed me that I wouldn't have any issues with Royce King again. The doctor stopped by my room late in the afternoon on what I believe was Tuesday, and told me that if I continued to make progress, I would likely be released in a few days. He advised me to take it easy and allow my body time to heal, reinforcing that it might take months before I was truly back to normal. My strength and appetite slowly returned. I was able to get up and move around. Although more than a few minutes of walking wiped me out, I finally managed to talk to my father, who was equal parts relieved and furious at me. He and Edward had a lot in common there. Dad didn't bring up Edward. But I knew it would only be a matter of time. Apparently they had spent a lot of time on the phone together, and Dad had given Edward the right to oversee my treatment in London. I was surprised at first. But Dad explained it as a logical choice. Almost half a day's time difference necessitated that someone here look out for me. I didn't ask him why he didn't choose Rose. I didn't need to. It was apparent in his voice. He apologized for not coming over. A heart attack a few years ago made it almost impossible for him to fly long distances safely. I didn't begrudge him that. I loved my father. Knowing that he was concerned and that he'd been in constant touch meant enough. Once I could keep down real food, and could get to and from the bathroom without incident, my docked. Or hinted that it was time for me to go home. The thought of a shower, clothes that didn't tie in the back, and a comfy bed sounded just short of heaven, and made me want to move things along that much faster. Edward watched me like a hawk, popping in multiple times throughout the day to make sure that I was behaving, as the proper patient should. No one else had come by to see me. I had the king suspicion that they had all be told to stay away until I had my strength back. While I knew that it was the right decision, it made me feel like I was encased in bubble wrap. A delicate keepsake, on the top shelf of a display cabinet that couldn't be touched or interacted with for fear of breaking it. It made me long for the outside world, my friends, my life. When Emmett showed up with flowers on Wednesday evening, I felt like I was being granted an audience with the Pope. "Hey there, you are almost back to looking human," Emmett called from the doorway, a large bouquet of wildflowers in his hand. "Not that I don't appreciate it, but what is it with people and flowers?" He looked down at the bouquet in his hands. "I thought women loved flowers." "We do, but I have a bit of an overabundance right now." I pointed at the table in the corner. "I have enough flora to build a float for the Rose Parade thanks to Alice. I think she cleaned out the florist. Then these will be in good company." He set the flowers down on the end of the bed and pulled up a chair. "How are you feeling?" "Better. Not quite ready to go into mixed martial arts, but I will have a cool scar on my arm that looks like a snake." Emmett shook his head. "You amaze me. Are you not afraid of anything?" "I'm afraid of a lot of things, Emmett. I just don't think sometimes." "Yeah, well, fortunately, the GRIZ that you got into it with didn't think much either. It could have been a lot worse." We stuck to the subject of my injuries and recovery. We were both dancing around the cause of the accident, with no clear way to break through. How is she, Emmett? I finally gave in, wanting to know, but strangely afraid of the answer. He sighed and took my hand. You know Rose. At first she was putting up a brave front. Worried about you more than anything. Once we knew you were stable and out of the woods, she broke down and told me everything. I can't say that I am proud of some of the things that I said to her. But they needed to get out there. The good news is that she wasn't hurt, and she's working through things one day at a time. Emmett paused as he reached up to trace a finger over the gauze covering my upper arm. She really wanted to come, but I think she's afraid of what you'll say. She blames herself for what happened, and is afraid that you will too. I blew out a breath and shift in my bed so that I could see Emmett better. I'm not mad at her, Emmett. Mad at the situation, sure, but she couldn't control what Royce did, so it would be wrong to be angry at her alone. Emmett nodded as if he understood. Did Edward tell you about King? Edward and I had spoken about my fall, but not the details surrounding it. I shook my head slowly, still trying to get comfortable with slow controlled motions. The police questioned him, but it was his word against Rose's. When I tried to back up her story, he started squawking assault claims at me, and got his lawyers involved. Before it could go anywhere, the police declared it an accident and he was on a plane to Tokyo with some cock and bull story about keeping an eye on the family investments. He got off. I sat up a bit straighter in my bed. The quick motion shooting pain through my body. Take it easy, Bella. You aren't ready for that yet. Edward stood in the doorway to my room. His gaze was leveled on Emmett, and he didn't look happy. Emmett stood, brushing the creases out of his khakis. I should let you rest. I'll tell Rose that you are doing better. When you feel strong enough, I know she'd like to hear from you. He turned to leave the room, stopping to quickly clap Edward on the shoulder before exiting. Are you okay? Edward asked as he sat down in the chair Emmett had just vacated. Yeah, although I am really getting tired of answering that question. I glanced at the door. Why do I have a feeling that there is something that Emmett didn't tell me? He smiled and placed a duffel bag on my bed, avoiding my question. I brought you something to make you feel better. I reached for the top, but he pushed my hand away. Not until I leave. I want you to take your time with it. Moving it to the table beside my bed. He nudged me to scoot over so that he could crawl in bed with me. I have the green light to take you home tomorrow. I sighed in appreciation. That is the best news I could have gotten. Thank you. I have the flat all ready for you. Lots of DVDs and food to fatten you back up. Jasper even dropped by some books on the off chance that you want to work on your dissertation. My dissertation. I hadn't thought about it since waking up in the hospital. My eyes darted to the chair on the far side of the room that held my backpack. Don't worry. Jasper called your advisor to let him know that you had been in an accident. Why did he do that? Edward looked down at our clasped hands, as if uncomfortable with the question. I didn't know if you were subject to the traditional school cycle. And didn't want you to miss out on your chance if you were in the hospital. I knew you were just at hard edit and proofreading stage, and I was going to have Jasper take care of it so that you were ready to go. But apparently the timing isn't an issue, so everything should be okay. The sincerity of his words brought tears to my eyes. I'd never had anyone do anything so complete unselfish for me. What are you crying for? Edward asked as he pushed my hair back from my face. I can't believe you did that for me. I don't know what to say, thoughts whirled around in my head. The fact that he cared so much. That he would help me complete something that could potentially take me away from London floored me. It was truly selfless. The sooner you get it done, the sooner we can get on with our lives. I'm just being logical, Bella. A knot had formed in my throat, making it difficult to talk. I don't know what to say. Just say thank you, and be dressed and ready to go by noon tomorrow, okay? He kissed my forehead and stood up. Call me if you need me to bring something else to wear. I put in what I thought would be easiest, but can always bring something else. Edward flipped off the light and pulled the door halfway shut with instructions to get some rest. But sleep wouldn't come. Instead, I laid in the dark, trying to make sense out of the chaos of my thoughts. Why emotions were too close to the surface, and made it impossible to be objective about our conversation. I wanted to dissect it, to understand why I felt such sadness in Edward's actions. But I didn't have the strength to go there. Flipping on the small light over my bed, I reached for the duffel bag that Edward had left on the table. Unzipping the top, I found a black leather book resting on top of my clothes. There was no title on the spine, and when I opened the pages, I was surprised to find handwriting as opposed to type. The script was familiar, and there was a date at the top of the page from late January. A note was paper clipped to the first page. All your answers regarding the accident and what happened after are here. I thought it would be easier for you to read them at your own pace than ask. There are things that are in here that predate the accident. My thoughts, rambles, whatever you want to call them. I thought reading them might help too. Whether we talk about them or not is entirely up to you. There is nothing in here that I wouldn't say to you now, therefore there is nothing to fear. These are my transparent thoughts. They are all yours. By 3 on Friday afternoon, I was settled on the couch in Edward's flat, propped up with pillows and wrapped in a blanket. I cracked my head. Edward, I don't have a cold. There is no need for me to be wrapped up like I have a fever. I protested as I tried to unwind myself. Indulge me. I feel the need to be overly protective. He'd been hovering over me ever since we left the hospital. It was endearing, but was starting to make me a bit claustrophobic. It's 70 degrees in here and you have me bundled in fleece. You are a sweetheart for worrying, but I am not going to slip into hypothermia, Edward. He stood over me, a curious expression on his face. What? Why that look? I inquired, wondering what could have stopped him in his tracks. Will it sound foolish to say I don't know what to do? There was a vulnerability in his voice that made me smile. He always expected to have the answers to everything. I held out my hand, palm up in invitation. Would it help if I told you what I'd like to do? Isabella. His reply was stern. Stop it, you deviant. I just want to curl up in your lap, okay? I wiggled my fingers. Please. Edward ran his hands through his hair before sitting down on the couch with a defeated sigh. I scrambled over the pillows to sit down in his lap, tucking my head in between his neck and shoulder. Much better, I sighed as I closed my eyes. It felt good to be out of the hospital, away from the constant interruptions and prying eyes. I let myself relax, breathing in slowly, enjoying the warmth and security of simply being together. Thank you, I whispered against Edward's chest. For what? He leaned his cheek against the top of my head, and wove his fingers together with mine. For this. For taking care of me. Thank you. You don't need to thank me, Bella. Edward kissed the top of my head. Rest. We've got plenty of time to talk. You need sleep. We've already lost so much time though, Edward. I tried to argue, but he'd have none of it. A few hours of sleep won't hurt. We can talk when you wake up. His free hand made slow smooth circuits up and down my back, helping me to relax into sleep. When I opened my eyes again, it was dark. We were stretched out, my back pressed against the couch. Edward's head resting against my chest, his arm wrapped securely around my waist. I didn't move, enjoying the relative quiet and peace of his even breathing. He had to be exhausted, keeping up his normal work schedule and hovering over me in his every spare minute. That knowledge, combined with what I'd read in his journal, weighed heavily on me. We'd traveled such a winding path to get to this point, and I struggled with overwhelming feelings that I couldn't define. At a base level, I was awed and intimidated by the words that I'd read last night in Edward's journal. To know how unconditional and all-encompassing his feelings were made me feel selfish and unworthy. I couldn't help but think back to our discussion on this same couch about our future. We'd both avoided any type of conversation about anything long-term, choosing instead to focus on the here and now. Or at least that's what I'd thought at the time. In hindsight, I'd been the one who had dodged the conversation. Edward had asked honest answers, and I'd avoided them. In some ways, it was just as bad as how he'd dodged my questions that day at the zoo. At the time, my decision had made sense. But I was quickly coming to the realization that it wasn't fair to anyone. The problem was that I didn't have an answer. I needed to finish my dissertation and find a job. I could only stay legally in the UK for 6 months without a visa. No job, no visa, and back to the States I would go. It wouldn't be realistic to expect Edward to go anywhere. He had a new career and was close to his family. I couldn't expect him to uproot his life in London for me. It would be yet another selfish expectation on my part. It stung to realize that I'd taken on the role of Mike in this relationship. I was the selfish one, not considering anyone but myself. Edward shouldn't be the only one who sacrificed. Which meant that if there was going to be it would be up to me to make the move. It wasn't as simple as relocating from Washington to Chicago. I'd have to leave my country, my family, my small group of friends behind. Other than a handful of people, I didn't know anyone in London. No family, no roots. No support system. What was that lovely quote? I'd be a stranger in a strange land. It would have been easy to throw caution to the wind and say that this is where I belonged. Part of me wanted to, desperately. But I also needed to be realistic. My bank account was dwindling quickly, and I had no clue what this hospital stay would do to my financial status. I didn't have any viable job prospects. It didn't matter if we were talking here or in the States. In a way, the whole thing was depressing. I was 27 years old. What had I accomplished in my life? All I knew was school. Other than being a TA, I'd never held anything other than typical college jobs like retail or food service. Yes, Edward had made the comment about having plenty of money, that he would take care of me. But was that really even an option? If I stayed here, what would that mean for the path I'd planned for myself? If I couldn't find a viable job, would it lead me to resent him? Even worse, would he resent me? There was no clear line of demarcation between what I needed and what I wanted. I didn't know how to separate my need to see things through with my desire never to be anywhere but with him. It was all a tangled mess. And I didn't have a clue as to how to unravel it all. My only beacon, my true north, was the man sleeping next to me. I couldn't begin to fathom my life without him. We were too intertwined now. Being anywhere but here was not an option. Yet as much as I needed to be with him, I also needed to complete something for myself. I deserved that. I felt Edward move, his arm tightening around my waist. One more day, I told myself. You have one more day to enjoy this. And then you need to have an honest conversation about what will be. You aren't being fair to him, and he deserves that. Pushing the melancholy aside, I slipped my arms around Edward's neck and buried my face in his hair. Believe it or not, I am hungry, and I really have to go to the bathroom, I whispered, not wanting to let go. Me too, but I don't want to move. I like it here. There was nothing unique or special about his words, but they made the knot in my chest grow a bit larger. He'd mentioned something in the last journal entry about there being no me, only us. I felt the exact same way, and yet I'd never had the courage to tell him that. He deserved better than I gave. Edward, the door interrupted me before I could say anything more. Edward groaned and sat up, running a hand through his disheveled hair. I hate drop-bys, he mumbled as he stood and tugged at the bottom of his Oxford. It was wrinkled and slightly askew from our time curled up on the couch, and the image for some reason tugged at my heart. He'd done so much for me, given so much, that it was physically apparent. My resolve of one more day suddenly felt childish. He put me ahead of everything, even himself. Not doing the same was selfish on my part. Sitting up slowly, I pulled my hair away from my neck as Edward opened the door. I wished that we could have told whoever it was to go away, that now wasn't the time. Rose stood on the threshold, a small bag in her hands. She looked sheepishly at Edward before shifting her gaze to me. No one spoke for a long moment. I brought some things that you didn't get when you were over. I thought that Bella might need them. Edward took the bag from her wordlessly, turning to allow her into the apartment. Rose stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, fidgeting with a non-existent thread on her cuff. Edward looked from her to me, as if assessing whether he needed to intervene. As if picking up on the undercurrent running between us, he grabbed his keys off the end table. I'll just go pick up some takeout. Any requests? I could tell that he didn't want to leave, but that he knew we needed time alone. Yet again, my needs above his. No, I'm okay. I gave him a smile in reassurance. I needed to deal with Rose too, and it would buy me some time to try and figure everything else out. I'll have my mobile. Call if you need me, okay? It was his way of asking to stay. But I needed to do this. I gave him a small nod of reassurance, which he reluctantly accepted before closing the door behind him. Rose had moved to the edge of the couch, where she stood twisting her hands in front of her. Hi, I extended the greeting as an olive branch. The relief in Rose's eyes was immediate. How are you feeling? I'm okay. A little sore, but okay. I hesitated, unsure as to how to continue. How are you? Rose looked back down at her hands, clearly uncomfortable with the question. I've been better. I wanted to come see you after you woke up. I did actually, but Edward didn't want me upsetting you until you were stronger, and I knew he was right. I nodded, neither in agreement or disagreement, simply acknowledging that I understood. Listen, Bella, I can't tell you how sorry I am. This whole thing is my fault, she started. I laughed and gingerly ran my hand through my hair. My scalp was still a bit tender, and it didn't jive well with my nervous habit. Yes, Rose, a lot of it was your fault. But you can't take it back, so what is the point of belaboring it? My words weren't harsh, just factual. She wouldn't meet my eyes, and continued to knot and unknot her hands. For some reason it reminded me of Edward sitting in front of the fire at Dunsley Hall. Steeple, relax. Steeple, relax. I'd heard him out, accepted his explanation. He'd taught me that life wasn't always black and white, that there were often facts that we didn't have that would color a decision. I needed to give her the same courtesy. Look, Rose, I have a lot of conflicting feelings right now, but it doesn't change the fact that I love you, and I am glad you are okay. We could dissect everything that happened, but it won't change things. Just give me some time, and it will be okay. Sighing, Rose sat down in an easy chair next to the couch. That's what Emmett told me. But I needed to hear it from you. I also needed to explain some things. I don't need you to explain anything. At least not right now. In time, I changed my statement. I told the police that I was confused and upset, and that once I calmed down I realized that I had misunderstood what happened. That's why the charges were dropped. They believe it was an accident. Shocked into silence, I scrambled to digest her statement. It made the news clippings I'd found in Edward's journal make sense now. The questioning, the hasty dropping of charges followed by Royce's sudden departure. He didn't get off. Rose let him get away. After everything he'd done, he was going to get off without even a slap on the wrist. Royce threatened to go after Emmett. He called me at work, I didn't know who it was, or I wouldn't have answered. Rose continued, her voice was shaking. He told me that if I continued to say that he assaulted you, that he caused your fall, he would make me pay. Then he Raiden to file charges against Emmett for assault. Royce's family could make Emmett's life miserable, and I couldn't let that happen. She was openly crying now. This was all my fault. You getting hurt, Emmett going after Royce. It was because of me and my stupidity, my need to be wanted. None of this would have happened if I would have listened to you in the first place. I couldn't speak. What would I say? That I was angry at her for letting Royce off the hook. That I was proud of her for putting Emmett ahead of her own needs for once. That I was furious at her for not thinking about my feelings in all of this. But doing so would have made me a hypocrite. She was just as knotted up as I was, and she understood that there was no easy answer for the dilemma she found herself in. It didn't mean that I supported her decisions. But I could at least admit that I empathized with her situation. We'd both been selfish in our actions. Those actions had a butterfly effect, and others were suffering because of it. Rose had called me an emotional vampire once. She'd done it to shock me, but she hadn't been too far off base. The sad thing was, that it applied to both of us. We didn't speak, didn't touch, didn't even look at each other. Rose sat and cried for a while longer, while I curled into myself on the couch, numb with confusion, anger, and sadness. Do you remember when you told me to be careful? Rose's voice was hoarse from crying. When we first moved here, and we were talking about Royce, I jokingly compared him to Arthur. You told me to be careful, that I could lose my EAD, and I told you I had him under control. I was so focused on me, that I never stopped to think what could happen to anyone else. I'm sorry for that. She stood, wiping the tears before moving towards the door. I accepted the offer to extend my stay in London. I am moving into a new flat the middle of the month. There is room for you if you want it. I'd very much like you to be there, but if not, I understand. Opening the door, Rose looked back over her shoulder at me. I'm sorry, Bella, more than I can tell you. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. All of my emotions were too close to the surface. And I was afraid if I spoke, I might say something I'd regret. The door clicked softly shut behind her. Rose was gone. I stood and made my way towards the bathroom, suddenly overwhelmed with the need to wash away the hospital. The memories, the sadness. The light over the sink in the bathroom was harsh, accentuating the bruises and shadows on the reflected at me in the mirror. I looked exactly like I felt. Pitiful. Turning on the water, I stripped out of my clothes and studied the roadmap of bruises on my body. They had faded to an eerie greenish brown, and stood out in stark contrast to my fair skin. Once the stitches were removed, the red of the scar on my arm would stand out just as starkly. I may emotionally put all this behind me someday, but the physical reminders would always be there. I slowly eased myself into the steaming water. It burned against my skin, and mixed with my tears as I frantically scrubbed at my skin. I could rub myself raw, but it wouldn't take anything away. The bruises would go away. The scars fade over time, but the impact had changed us all forever. Bella, are you okay? Edward called through the door. There was nothing I could do, nothing I could change. I could scrub for all it was worth, but the damage was done. I dropped the washcloth and turned off the water. Yeah, I'll be out in a minute. Grabbing a towel from the rack by the tub, I dried off. The bruises were now complemented by rosy pink from the heat of the shower. The contrast was grotesque, like a child's drawing gone awry. I bought you a robe, it's on the back of the door. Why don't you wrap up and crawl in bed? I'll bring you some food. I grabbed the robe from the hook and pulled it on. It was too big for me, and I had to roll the sleeves up a few times so that my hands weren't lost in the white terry cloth. But it was warm, and covered up the visible reminders of what had happened. A lamp was on in Edward's room, one side of the bed turned down and waiting for me. Bubba lay on my pillow, threadbare and worn against the English cotton. He fits there, Edward observed from behind me. Go crawl in bed. I climbed in and pulled my knees to my chest. He say, the tray he was carrying down in the center of the bed before climbing up next to me. We'll do an improvised picnic. I have soup, sandwiches and that disgusting sparkling water you like so much. I watched him as he shifted things around on the tray. His shirt was still a wrinkled mess, and it looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Edward had run himself into the ground for me. Moved my NGS into his home to keep me safe and to watch over me. Turned his life upside down for me. Everything he'd done, even since before the accident, had been for me. I could feel the tears start to build again. My doctor warned me that fluctuating emotions were a byproduct of my injury, and that I shouldn't panic, they would adjust over time. But I knew that the swings were giving me a clarity that I didn't have before. And that I needed to trust that clarity. Edward sat down on the edge of the bed and reached out to wipe away a tear. What's wrong? I laughed and shook my head. What was wrong? What was right? It was all mixed up together and screaming to get out. Hey, Bella, come on. Edward pulled me into his lap and wrapped his arms around me. It's okay, just let it out. I shook my head again and reached up to wipe away the tears with the back of my hand. I'm okay, just having a moment is all. Edward tipped my chin up so that he could look directly in my eyes. I wasn't prepared for what I saw staring back at me. Concern, apprehension, because of me. He deserved better. What did Rose tell you? I wiped an eye with the back of my hand and took a deep breath. About what happened with Royce. What she did. Edward's narrowed, and I could see the anger simmering just below the surface. I see. Did she tell you why? I nodded my head, unable to say yes. She didn't think I would find out what happened. That Emmett wouldn't tell me. He continued quietly, anger accenting his commentary. She was so focused on Emmett, she never stopped to think about you. Edward, we are all guilty of that in some way. Emmett went to help Rose, you stayed with me. Apparently I stood up to Royce. It's human nature. It may be human nature, but I refuse to let her selfishness hurt you anymore. Emmett and I have already discussed this, and he said the same to Rose. Her narcissism caused all of this, and then she goes and lets the bastard off. Some friend, but it wasn't that black and white. Nothing in life seemed to be anymore. Don't you understand, Edward? She let Royce go because she couldn't let Emmett get hurt. It wasn't about her, it was about Emmett. He shook his head, refusing to concede the point. It was selfish, Bella. She wanted Emmett, so she sacrificed your justice to keep him. Or maybe she knew that I would have done the same thing. Did you ever stop to think about that? He frowned in confusion. I don't follow you. You said I stood up to Royce. If that is what I did, it must have been for a good reason. You do strange things for people you love. We stared at each other, not speaking. The expression on Edward's face was heartbreaking, a mixture of hope and sadness. Edward, I would have done the same thing if I were in Rose's position. I couldn't let anything happen to you. I brought my hands to his chest, finding that familiar spot over his heart. I had compared the beating of his heart to an anchor. But calling it an anchor was wrong. It didn't weigh me down. It gave me the strength to stand on my own, to find out who I was and what I could be. It didn't hold me back. It gave me flight. My fingers fanned out over his chest, focusing on the staccato of his heartbeat. You hold that in the palm of your hand, you know that, don't you? Edward asked quietly. The honesty and resignation in his tone were devastating. And you don't think it's the same for me? I couldn't look up at him. Is it, Bella? You know exactly how I feel. And yet you keep me guessing. I contracted my fingers, bunching the fabric of his shirt in my hand. I was tethering him to me. Trying to hold on to him, if not literally then figuratively. I could feel his heartbeat increase a bit, but he didn't try to pull away. I squeezed the material of the shirt in my hand a bit tighter. using it as a focal point as I spoke. I love you. My declaration hung in the air between us, awkward in the silence. I know you worry that it's primarily sexual attraction with me, but it's not. Look at me, Bella. Edward's request was quiet, but firm. I swallowed, but couldn't look up. He brought his hand under my chin, forcing me to lift my head so that we were eye to eye. Say it again, please. He used his free hand to wipe away a tear as it slid down my cheek. I took a deep breath, unable to look away. I love you. He smiled and wiped away another tear. You know, I am not a religious man. But I found myself making deals with God while I was waiting for you. I promised ridiculous things. I even begged. I just wanted you to come back to me. I guess he must have listened. Because not only are you okay, but you told me the one thing that I wanted here. I swiped away another tear with the back of my hand. If this is one of the byproducts of a head injury, it's getting damn old. But it gives me a chance to save the day. White knight and all that rubbish. Edward teased gently. His thumbs continued to wipe away the tears as they fell. I felt like I was incapable of stopping them. I don't have any answers. I needed to be honest, to lay it all out there. I have no clue how to figure this out. I just know that it has to be with you. We'll find a way to figure it out. He kissed me gently, his hands cupping my face as if I might break. Now you need to eat and get some rest. I want you to save your energy. I have a surprise for you tomorrow. He released my face and lay back on the bed. I know it's not Sunday morning, but I believe I wanted to stretch out in bed and watch the telly with you. What will it be? It was so ridiculously normal, so average. And yet it was the most perfect thing he ever could have said. Because, to use Edward's words, it was everything and nothing, and that was all that mattered. We will continue in next part.